Started. This is Small Council, which we have Saturdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. We have a fantastic group of individuals here. I'm excited to introduce them. But first, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. And consider becoming a YouTube member, hitting that join button, and supporting the channel. Also, we do gaming on YouTube. It's a lot of fun. And we'll have, member nights where we'll like game with members. We want to, if you're a member on YouTube, we'll game together. It'll be really cool. So consider becoming a YouTube member. And check out our gaming nights. We're there Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and we're having a lot of fun. So all right, and I'll introduce people, starting for Black Man.
Yeah. One drop rule. It's 2022. We're still following the one drop rule tool, by the way. Hey. How's it going? It's been a while. It's Bad Latin here. I feel like most of everyone in chat should know me by now. If everybody else is streaming, Mad Latin. I talk about politics. I teach chess. I do a thing called You Might Like This on Mondays with Lilac Doll, who is brilliant and hilarious. On Sundays, I do weekly stand-up with Jessica Gonzalez, Josh Miller, and Mike Knowles. We talk about workers' rights and game development. If you go to my Twitter, it's just MadLadN. You can find me there and get all the updates when I'm on stream doing all the various things that I do. I'm putting up a brand new schedule up sometime tonight, and it's gonna be pretty good.
Okay, all right. Next, we have our friend Lactoid, who is always a pleasant addition to these panels. Thank you, Lactoid, for coming through.
Thank you, Prime. Hi, friends. My name is Lactoid. I'm a libertarian lawyer. Don't ask me for meth instructions, and certainly don't pay me money for any, because you won't get any. You can find me on Anti-Communism United on Discord and Twitch.
All right. Best opening we've had in a while, honestly. I'm gonna have to give that to you. All right, we'll see if H9 will be able to surpass him. H9, we haven't had you for quite a while, like a long time, especially on a closed panel. But we're very happy to have you here. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. I was finishing up some school. I graduate in a week. I'm very excited. Start a new career, move to a new city.
Wow. I'm excited for you. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
What area?
Economics and accounting. And then I look to take the CPA exam like this coming fall.
Dude. Well, seriously, congratulations and good work. Good
Thank
shit.
you.
Yeah. All right. Well, we all.
No, but I'm more happy to be here.
Of course. Must be. Thank you so much. All right. Next, we have my man Eucharist, making my day by being a part of this. Right? How are you, Eucharist?
I'm doing well. I don't have anything to plug because I don't really stream or do any of this, so I'm just gonna use my little brief moment here to say I'm still fantasizing about what it's like to be a libertarian lawyer. Like, I'm imagining you in like a courtroom scenario, and instead of doing like a land acknowledgement, right, you stand up and you say where you're like, I would just like to acknowledge that I reject the legitimacy of the state under which we function. All right, that said, and then you go on, right? That's sort of how I'm imagining that works. But yeah, I'm Eucharist. I do like fake political science, political theory stuff, and overlap of tech and freedom. So this is like right up my alley, and I'm really excited to talk with you guys about it.
Thank you. All right.
I only take payment in Dogecoin.
What?
He's great. Next, we have another one of the people I'm just always happy to have around. My man Wick. This is why I call on him often. How are you doing, Wick?
All so far so good, but still plenty of time for things to go terribly wrong. I'm excited for tonight. As those of you who do watch my show and watch Prime often when I come on his open panels and things will attest to, I'm a big supporter of free speech, so this is a great topic for me. I'm really excited to have been invited, and I'm really excited to be here. If you guys like my takes or hate my takes, you can find me at twitch.tv/deathcertainty. All one word. Check me out. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it's a Prime panel. It wouldn't be right if it didn't go wrong, honestly. Last but not least, we have our friend Zonia. It's been a little bit. By that, like, the 2 weeks. But still. And then, like, like much before then, you know. So Zonia, happy to have you around. I'm really glad that you said yes. You know, I wasn't sure if I would get that, but I did, and I was happy. You know, I did a little dance in here, right? You can't prove that I didn't. So Zonia, thanks for being around. Wow, brilliant. And you know, her words will resound through all of time. But it's only truly a wordsmith.
Hey, is that working?
It's the censorship
Yeah.
right here.
There we go.
All right, there we go. Yeah, go figure. They're going to censor the one trans girl. Yeah, so I'm Zonia Dead at Twitch, and no underscore. Me, I am a far left Marxist Leninist. I tend to stand for Stalin, obviously, the one true leader that we could ever have. And I think he did everything right. I stand by everything that he's done. For me, I think this is a great topic because honestly, what we're talking about today with Elon Musk and taking over Twitter and such, freedom of speech, this is a pretty awesome topic for me because there's never been a time that I've ever said anything spicy on Twitter, never anything risky. And I tend to only do like really lighthearted, family-friendly kind of like fanfic of Twitch politics, stuff that you can show to your kids, right, without shame. So this is going to be a fun topic. Really, I'm going to enjoy this. Again, Zonia Dead at Twitch. Looking forward to this.
Okay, all right. I'm really excited about this as well. All right, so let's just jump into it. A topic. Elon Musk, upon purchasing Twitter, has vowed to create a more open platform, free of censorship. Is this a future we want? Would this improve Twitter? Would it improve it for everyone or just particular groups? And do you think Elon is the right man for this job? So yeah, people want me to talk about the Elon thing. I don't really care. But still, people really want to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it because we deliver for our subscribers out there. So shout out to you. Like Zonia, who just resubbed for 13 months. Thank you, Zonia. Really kind of you. All right. So we'll do intro statements. Start with Mad Latin.
Yeah, I think an unhinged billionaire purchasing a massive social media platform while delivering like really shitty takes for like the past several days afterwards bodes quite well for the future of Twitter. All his talk of SSRIs and Adderall and Wellbutrin being bad things and, you know, undermining mental health across the world will only make Twitter a safer and better place. No, I mean, like, okay. Like, seriously, it's really funny to me how, like, you know, folks on the right talk about how free speech is all important and shit. And then they resort to, like, these sort of, like, authoritarian means of forcing the free speech down everyone's throat. Like, Twitter is, like, kind of the Wild West of the social media anyway. Like, I didn't realize it until I got Twitter, but, like, people are posting, like, all sorts of shit there that's, like, not safe for work. Like, you can literally almost post anything. To get banned from Twitter, you have to really, really work hard at it. So, like, the idea that it's not free enough is outrageous to me. And this actually reminds me a lot of, like, what happened in Florida, right? Where, like, you know, we talk about free speech and how much we like free speech, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, there's, like, you know, but it's the right kind of free speech that matters, you see. Because, you know, you had the Don't Say Gay bill where folks who are... you know, talking about things that are heteronormative are going to get sued by the state, et cetera, right? And, like, Disney speaks out against it. And then you watch, like, all the right-wingers in the state punish Disney as a corporation for demonstrating free speech. So, like, anyone who's, like, backing this whole billionaire buyout of Twitter, but then also standing with Governor DeSantis and what he's doing to Disney simultaneously are fucking hypocrites, for sure. And I've seen a lot of that, like, just in the arguments I've been having over the past week over this. And I can't wait for this to present itself right here, right now, tonight.
Thank you. Next, we have Lactoid, please.
Yeah, so they're not hypocrites, but this is not a time to respond. This is a time to give an intro. I understand why people are skeptical of Elon purchasing Twitter. Generally speaking, I don't like companies going private either. prevents common people from being able to invest in capitalism, and instead it concentrates power. That said, individuals are free to buy and sell as they wish, and if the company follows their operating agreements and sells control for the benefit of the shareholders, this can't be stopped. So the question we have to ask ourselves is whether or not this is a good thing for society. I think what we need to do is we need to analyze Elon's history. What are the values and goals that Elon espouses? Consistently, Elon Musk has pursued lofty goals, but all within the benefit of humanity. Electric cars, interstellar colonization, solar panels, underground transportation. These projects are aimed at creating an efficient and advanced society that, if realized, we should all agree we would like to live in. From everything Elon has said, it seems like his goals for Twitter are equally as benign. Guaranteeing freedom of speech so we don't end up in an Orwellian hellhole is a laudable goal. Freedom of expression is an independent American ideal. And for years, the lefties have told us that our other ideal, private property, allows for censorship of ideas. We've all heard it. Twitter is a private company. It can do what it wants. Well, now we're going to have the best of both worlds. Twitter is a private company. It can do what it wants. And now it wants to guarantee that expression is realized and not just promised.
I'm going to ask the question that was asked in my chat. Are you an unironic Elon stan?
I think generally he's a good person. I don't think he's like a god, but I think he's pretty cool.
Oh, okay. He hasn't hit. Oh, guys, he doesn't think he's a god. Okay, good. Thanks. Off that. All right. Rebranded Ham. Thank you for continuing your sub you got from Desperado Sensei. You're awfully kind of you. Thank you so much. Rebranded Ham. Okay, H9.
Yes. To make a hot take, many conservatives say there's only two types of genders. But to make a hotter take, there's only two types of Musk fans. You either hate him or you love him. There's only those two types of people in this world. And you can say Musk is just this crazy, exotic billionaire doing something that's never been done before, but this has been done. People, I forget, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post for, I think, all cash. So he didn't go out and get funds from a bank or something else. He had bought that all by himself. This isn't something that's happened before. And in this $46 billion that he paid for Twitter, Musk borrowed $25 billion of that from Bank of America and Morgan Stanley's. These people are literally the shareholders now. They're going to have dramatic input on what Musk and what Twitter can do. And Twitter's main source of revenue are ads. No one's going to want their ads next to a Nazi. That's just not going to happen. Tide, Coca-Cola, all the people who buy ads don't want their names next to Nazis. Musk isn't going to be like, oh my God, I love Nazis and they can now be on Twitter. This isn't going to happen. Yes, maybe people can meme more. Maybe bans won't be permanent. Maybe the algorithm may be public open source, but nothing's going to change. He's going to cut costs, like he said, and he's going to trim, make it a little bit more of a meme site. That's all that's going to happen.
Next, we have our friend Eucharist, please.
Yeah, so I'll say I'm not an Elon stan, but I will say I think Elon Musk is like one of the funniest human beings alive. Like he got all of you guys to buy Dogecoin. He like gets people to freak out. Like he's got people thinking that like Judgment Day and Skynet is coming in a decade. Like the dude is hilarious. He memes really well. Like, you know, he dated a goth girl for like, this is just great. Like he's peak internet. It's amazing. So who else do you want running Twitter? Just absolutely hilarious. More substantively, I think like I'm going to agree a lot with Wick. Like in general, I'm dispositionally in favor of like free speech as an overarching political social norm, because we live in political communities now that are pluralistic, that can't rigorously censor ideas, ideologies, thinkers, texts the way that a smaller or like kind of homogenous community could or would. You know, we could, but it would come with like some pretty grave injustices that I think a lot of us would find problems with. But that doesn't mean also that kind of anything goes, or that nothing can be like broadly discouraged through policy or through kind of content moderation. And so importantly for the Twitter conversation, as we've already mentioned, yeah, Twitter is kind of the Wild West of the internet already. It's pretty much a free speech zone in a lot of ways, right? Twitter is an outlier compared to a lot of social media platforms and allowing some things that it does, including porn. And so it's like, it's already pretty wacky, and it doesn't seem like Elon wants to change much other than basically trying to resist some impulses towards censoring certain ideas that he thinks are coming internal from the company. Whether or not that's true or not, we can talk about. out. But I think like for me, I don't think a kind of anarchic or chaotic free speech, everybody gets to say whatever they want, anything goes thing really ultimately works out well for anyone. Twitter is a shit show and it's a hellhole, and you know it's good for what it is, but nobody thinks that it's a great place to accomplish like excellent discourse. Where you go to find excellent discourse is places that have like pretty substantial moderation, smaller communities that have norms that if you violate them, you find out pretty quickly and you reap the consequences and you get kicked out, right? So a place that is more chaotic like Twitter is and is going to be under Musk is not really going to be the place that accomplishes the kind of thing that a lot of us are really aiming at in our political discourse. So yeah, we can talk more about all that.
Thank you. All right, next we have Wick.
Hi. So when it comes down to the topic at hand, Twitter being bought out by Elon Musk, we have to look at what Elon Musk says he wants to do. What he will actually do and what this is going to look like in the future, none of us here are oracles or, wizards that can suss this out, but we can make some predictions based on what he said. One of the things he has actually mentioned wanting to do is remove ads from Twitter. That is something that he's actually wanting to accomplish. Whether or not he'll do that, we'll see. He wants also to pull back on a lot of what he sees as heavy-handed moderation when it comes to certain ideas and things like that. I think that's a laudable goal. Censorship is a tool of oppression, not a tool of protection. Let's make that clear. That's historically how it's been used. When it comes to other things, he's, for example, going to add an edit button. So what that effect will have, I have no idea. Some other things that he wants to do, and I have a list right here. He wants to make the algorithm that Twitter uses to promote its content open source, and I think that's only a good thing. Making that information free and so people can look at it and see how it works is going to be a great thing for Twitter as a whole. Eucharist is right. Right now, it's not a place for interesting discussion. It's not a place for these things. We can't pretend that it is. If you want a place for interesting discussion, you should come and check out PrimeCayes, where he does his closed and open panels. It's a very good place for interesting discussion. So overall, when it comes down to it, censorship is something that we should use as little as possible. We should allow as much free speech as possible in the public square. And again, once again, censorship is not a tool of protection. It is a tool used to conform the status quo, to keep the status quo, so to speak. That's my statement.
Quo. Okay. Yeah. We bring Wick on for the zingers. All right. Moving on. We'll go to Sonia.
Yeah. By the way, I switched my audio. I've been having some audio issues since my settings got reset in Streamlabs. Or not Streamlabs, whatever you call it, StreamYard. So hopefully it sounds better now. Yeah, so I largely agree with Sam Law and Wick that there have been Elon wants to make a lot of changes. He's going to have to, if he really wants to go in the direction that he wants to go in terms of free speech, he is going to have to move away from advertisers, because that becomes sort of the linchpin there for that pins him down to having to fit some sort of political language narrative that they're okay with. And even if like the advertisers are okay with the language initially, as soon as a certain body of people get angry with another body of people, they can turn on the advertisers and effectively say, if you're going to put up with this kind of language that your ads are associated with, we're going to make a big stink about it. And then the advertisers go and they're like, oh no, we're going to have to pull out, or you guys are going to have to start censoring stuff. And I also agree with Wick in that censorship tends to be directed toward political purposes that usually move in a form of momentum that tends to oppress an underdog, tends to be used against an underdog, and it is weaponized against groups that don't have as much ability to fight back and have their voices heard, especially when they need to say something that they feel is important. So though things currently things may move in a direction that benefits, say, a leftist or left-wing political position, it wouldn't be too hard eventually for the pendulum to swing and to go in another direction that could actually be detrimental to left-wing political positions and vice versa. So I think that we do need to have a more open platform that allows for more liberty of speech and is less punitive. Transparency, I think, is the most important thing that Elon Musk is talking about bringing to the platform. I think transparency is very important because things are so ambiguous now. You oftentimes don't understand why it is that you're being penalized, and the rules seem to be inconsistently applied. So I think that's going to be a benefit. However, I think Musk is going to have a huge series of hurdles to get over to unchain the platform from its revenue streams that currently will limit the ability to be unfettered in terms of freedom of speech and such. So that's where I'm coming from with this.
So
Okay.
I just want to
just
really
before
push
you
back
go,
here.
And you go first.
Sure.
I think we got enough people handling this. I'm gonna take myself off screen. If Matt needs backup, basically, then I'll come back on. But
Okay.
other than that, I think he's got it. All right.
No, so like just this idea that we've already discussed like what free speech is, which is like a government deciding what you're allowed to say versus like a private business deciding like whether or not to like facilitate discussion, right? So like advertisers are being
speech.
Right. So,
liberating speech.
But I guess like what I'm saying is that like if advertisers are being railed against for supporting content that people don't support, that's a form of free speech. That's a part of the discourse. That's a part of the dialogue. So removing the advertising from a platform actually undermines free speech in a completely different way, does it not?
No, not at all. It just removes financial incentive and pressure, right? That doesn't mean that people can't still object or criticize or anything like that.
So we're saying that
their means to force their opinion.
Yeah, it means you're flattening out.
Is Patreon necessarily a worse or lesser freedom of speech site because they don't have ads?
No, it means
Patreon's a different. You don't use Patreon for social media and Patreon are.
No, wait. It's
in the case of like Twitter, though, you're flattening out the playing field, right? Because you're taking away the ability for more of a political movement to force speech. Right. So what you're doing is you're taking some of those levers away to flatten out the playing field.
So you're taking away people who don't have so these are people who have spending power, right? That's their leverage. And you're saying, hey, you can't use that leverage that you have. These aren't like millionaires who are going to pull out. It's literally people who are on the grassroots level organizing to boycott an advertiser who might be supporting content that's really shitty.
Yeah, this assumes that it's not the people with millions of dollars astroturfing these movements, right? Like
well, either way, without the advertisers, the millionaires can do it by themselves anyway.
Organizing these protests or going against ad companies and things are these grassroots poor folk. It's just not true.
Well, no. I mean, actually, for the most part, if you've got millions of dollars, it's way more efficient to just directly lobby whatever respective government you want to lobby and go in that direction. Grassroots movement is not traditionally centered around a millionaire's interest unless you happen to be a Donald Trump, I guess.
Astroturfing happens all the time.
One big difference with Twitter is that the advertisements themselves don't have to do with the content that you put up on there. It shows in line with the feed and is inserted. So it's not as easy to leverage against advertisers on Twitter. Which is why we haven't seen a lot of that, though there have been certain instances in the past where advertisers where pressure was put on them to deal with Trump for the kind of stuff that he was putting onto Twitter, but Twitter never acted on it until Trump was out of office, right? So it didn't really work. So it's not necessarily a strong leveraging point, but it could be potentially if enough people can move as a unit and put pressure on the advertisers to say your advertisements are on a disgusting site. How are you supporting this?
So you're now saying so it is and is not important.
Yeah, it's less important. So I'm kind of thinking it through a little bit here, and I don't think it's quite as strong a leveraging point. I think that they could, with enough momentum behind a large enough group, could probably push that, but we didn't see it work with Trump while he was in office.
So I would just say that like maybe it's like a moot point then and not worth like discussing in terms of like free speech then, that would be fine with me. Like I'm kind of like pushing back on this idea that like, well, I mean, I think that pushing against advertisers is a form of free speech. Like removing advertisers to prevent that sort of free speech is going against free speech. But B, on top of that, I do agree that it was largely ineffectual anyway.
It's not necessarily a free speech. Okay, it is leveraging free speech, but it comes down to sort of a majority or mob rules kind of approach, which I would say
it's not though. That's not even because you have to be. You just have to be a sizable minority in order to convince a business to maybe change their methods, right?
Which would be mob rules, right?
Well, no,
one or the other.
It is. Do you think that what is the limit you put on here, Matt? This is my question. Do you think that a majority or even a sizable minority of people should be able to limit what you say or do not say? Do you think that we should be able to vote, whether it be with our money, our advertising dollars, our eyeballs, or not our eyeballs, but whether vote or think on what you should or should not be allowed to say or think? Do you think we should have that power?
We should. I'm going to be very. I have to kind of thread this needle here because it's really easy to take the words that I'm about to say and misrepresent kind of the direction I'm going. Generally speaking, if someone is offended by a statement that you can make, it's usually better not to make that statement, right? Just generally speaking, on a very micro level. If you don't want to offend someone, don't say something that'll piss them off.
Certainly,
right.
Civility,
so if we expand on that concept and we talk about terms and things that can be said to a sizable group of sizable population that might offend the entirety of that sizable population. For example, SSRIs don't work, and there's a sizable population of folks who use them to get through their daily lives. I would say that is kind of offensive and kind of shitty to do. And perhaps there should be some sort of consequence for saying something that's fucking stupid.
The problem
what sort of consequence are you expecting?
Mad Lad,
or would you
just real quick? Yeah,
it's very natural. You just let the people who are offended do the shit they want to do to change that, right?
So the people who are offended when you advocate for trans rights will be able to vote you out. Basically, the people who are offended. See, being offended is not a good threshold because people get offended all the time over stupid shit. And if a particular viewpoint cannot be conveyed through words or means that the audience members are likely to regard as civil and respectful.
Look, I get that you're really passionate about this, but you're again doing that thing that I'm telling you that I didn't want you to do, which is kind of stretch it to this whole other world.
What do you mean?
Let's focus.
This is there's historical precedent for this, right?
There's historical precedent.
Out of my ass.
There's historical precedent for both free speech being undermined to promote tyranny, but there's also lots of times that are much less notable, through the historical record, where free speech was kind of undermined to maintain stability and maintain actual freedoms, right? This does happen. So it just doesn't stand out because nothing bad happened, right?
The Elon example, right, with the SSRIs and everything else. I'm wondering what exactly you would like to happen, or what political mechanisms you expect to exist to deal with that, other than what's actually happening, which is every person who knows anything about pharmacology and psychology on Twitter is dragging him relentlessly, and he has said himself that this is the kind of thing that he wants to happen. You say something stupid, Twitter is a space where people who know more than you can correct you publicly and go viral for it and profit off of it even, right? So what's happening right now is he said dumb things, people are correcting him, and people are learning more than they did previously. Yes, there are fanboys, people who like him, who are gonna, fall right in line with what he said. But if what you're saying is, well, yeah, the people get mad and they should have some mechanism available to them to then, actively punish him, take away his access to Twitter, delete that content, or ban him, or punish him, in some other way. That just seems like a step too far. Where we're already seeing the mechanism work the way that it should, right?
Well, it depends on the statement, right? The SRI's thing is very, very easy to work with because there is a set of studies. There's a lot of science involved in determining how all this stuff works. There's a lot of people who rely on SSRIs to get through their days. So the blowback, the very natural verbal blowback, is quite effective actually. And I agree with you. What's happening on Twitter right now in regards to Elon Musk's tweet is fantastic. And we don't really need to censor him necessarily because he's being shat on by everyone. Fine, great, whatever. However, there are some things that are a little bit more subtle. A lot of there are ways that you can, I'm being kind of vague here a little bit, and maybe I can be a little bit more specific. There are more debatable stances that you can take that are extremely harmful, right? Like you get like there's kind of like this. I guess I really didn't want to get into like Twitch politics drama, but I guess I'm just going to do it because here we are. Like it's the only example that's coming to my mind.
I mean, examples are great, so do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'll like get this thing going, right? Like, so a bunch of like so-called leftists on Twitter decided that spelling out the N-word would be hilarious.
Oh, that was
right?
so cringe.
Yeah, so like, so like, you know, 6 different people spelled the N-word repeatedly, and like every black creator I know looked at that and thought to themselves, "What the fuck?" And Twitter's not going to do anything about it, but like these people who did this thing kind of did something despicable, right? It showed exactly what kind of safe space Twitch politics is and for who it is for. And like people like Counsel shouldn't even be fucking having a platform. Apparently he's done all sorts of really vile shit. And like he's still given an opportunity to, you know, have his little space, and he's got his 100 fucking viewers helping him out, saying, "Oh no, he's great," and all this other shit.
Be careful about naming names of people who aren't here on the panel to defend themselves.
Sorry,
no, name names.
Let's get more.
Well, I mean,
a little more.
Not to. Okay, that's fair. I think that's fair. I probably shouldn't have.
No, it's soy to not name names.
Well, no, I mean that's fair. I shouldn't have called.
If that's how you feel, that's how you feel.
Yeah, we should let him.
No, you're right. No, Zoni is absolutely right. I should not be calling people out like that. That's
okay, but Zoni's right about everything else but this.
But like my point is though that
Matt Latin, you go, and then I will get H9. He seemed to have something I want to say, and then you, Chris, and Latin.
Okay, well, it's fine. Go ahead. I'm just gonna stop and like let H9 take over.
I know a lot of people won't care about this, but Patreon is a sub-based model. So content creators create content and they distribute it based on subs. Twitter distributes content based on ads. So instead of you going on Twitter and paying your tweeter some type of fee every month, you see ads, and that's how the company makes revenues. Patreon makes money because they take a fee of that sub. If Twitter were to go to a subscription-based model, they could just add anyone they wanted. Any Nazi could go make an account, but you wouldn't be able to see that Nazi's account. Like, I can't go see Lauren Southern's Patreon because I've never given a penny to Lauren Southern, and I never will. So I think we got to be really like specific. Like when Elon Musk talks about removing ads, it could be for the better, and it could just turn Twitter into Patreon. Just like how YouTube works. YouTube is an ad-based business model. You get on there, all the videos are pretty much free. You watch a 30-second ad to see it.
I mean, okay, so like I think the one thing that Twitter has going for it that's like better than everything else is the fact that it does not have this subscription-based.
Yes, I totally agree with you there. Right. It's unique and how it should be. And
like we can literally like call out Mark Hamill and he might like respond in a tweet, right? Yeah. Like I think that's pretty cool. Like, yes. I don't think we should. I don't think Twitter needs to be changed.
I totally agree with you, and I think it's crazy to think Musk is going to remove ads, and then removing ads is a blight against freedom of speech. If we were to turn Twitter into a Patreon, then every paying person could voice their opinion with their dollar instead of having ad companies who represent customers voicing their opinion. It would be more direct, even, of a freedom of speech stance.
Right. And I mean, so I guess like where I'm kind of I guess like my concerns are like twofold, right? And we'll have to talk about like the societal impact of freedom of speech a little bit more. But I also think in terms of the impact on the business and like the workers of that business, like on Weekly Stand Up, I've been exposed
7,000 to 9,000 people work at Twitter. That's a lot.
So like on the show Weekly Stand Up, I've been like, you know, kind of exposed to a lot of things that happen under the veil at all these various game dev companies. And it's really, really shitty when someone at the top starts making these drastic changes and then not accounting for the butterfly effect that works its way down the company. And I think like those are the two paths that we could actually kind of continue this discussion. We can do the societal free speech stuff because I think we've got some strong opinions that I have to shit on real quick. And maybe Lactoid too. Lactoid's been kind of silent and careful so far. But once that's done, we should probably go to the impact on the business, I would think. I don't know. Go ahead, what were you going to say?
Oh, I don't want to monopolize. If Lactoid or Eucharist has something to say, I'll wait for them. So.
I guess I was just wondering, like, I wasn't quite following Mad Lattin's logic about if Elon's goal, right, is to create a platform that is less beholden to outside business interests in terms of its moderation. I don't see how that is an attack on anybody's free speech. It's just, like I running a business have can create opportunities for other people to give me money for me to help them out, or I cannot. That's sort of my choice. Those people with bukus of money can go, express their speech wherever they want. They can buy billboards, they can buy ads in the Washington Post from Bezos, they can do whatever they want. But if the goal, as he stated it, is we want a platform that is not beholden to these outside business interests for our moderation standards, we want standards that are sort of internally determined, generally free, in line with the law. That doesn't seem like it's really attacking anybody's free speech. So I wasn't really following the logic.
You're saying outside. Notice how you keep saying outside business interests. Like there are business interests that are still.
I know. Right? Yeah.
Like internal business interests. So it's going to be anyone that Elon Musk likes is going to have.
Well, right now the internal business interests are to the large stakeholders, which include like Saudi princes and a bunch of other shitty people, right? So
no, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley specifically don't.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, like, the goal, as he's stated it, is to go private so that there's not this like fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. There's not that pressure. It can be decided internally. Yes, obviously he has a profit motive, right? He wants his business to succeed. I'm assuming his goal isn't to tank it, although that would be really funny to be the funniest thing he ever did if his goal was just to totally tank the platform. But like his goal is to take it out of the hands of these external deciders who are putting pressure on the business, and to do it in a way that is good for, the company has a mission and it's defined and people can accept it or not, and they can go somewhere else if they don't like it. Somebody in chat said, give me an example of a time when the free speech debate wasn't about defending white supremacists. I mean, this is like reaching far back in history, but I don't know, maybe when the abolitionists were defending their right to free press and free speech from people literally murdering them and throwing their printing presses in rivers. Like, yeah, this is really actually important for defending minority rights. Don't just say that like the only reason people are defending free speech is to defend the white supremacists.
We can only go back like 20 years when we talk about gay marriage, for example. That was a thing that a lot of people were wanting to censor. They were wanting to shut down in a large way. Like,
I know we all want to talk about inward discourse, but it just blows my mind that we think the only way this is useful is so racists on the internet can be more racist more freely. That's just not. It's just
you are.
That's not the only.
Everybody in there who has been interacting on the internet in the U.S. at least is a benefactor of freedom of speech, and a lot of people don't realize like how much they have benefited from it, regardless of what their political positions are. One thing that we should also call out, though, is that no matter what, any company, even a private company, still has its investors that have a stake in the company that will care about these things. And those investors, even though it's a private company, that's something that never is well hidden, right? So it's always going to be known, and those investors themselves can have pressure put on them. For instance, their other products can be targeted by people who are protesting. And that's something that has also happened before with other companies, with private companies in particular, where they'll target the investors because the investors come from other, they've got other holdings, and those holdings are targeted. So that was something that happened with the Koch brothers, where a lot of their products that they own were boycotted by people, by left-wingers, right, in order to get them to stop putting money into political campaigns for conservatives and such. So that's something that's been used many times before, and will probably get used again, even with Twitter being private, because no matter what, the list of investors, of private investors, is going to get out. So that will definitely be a hurdle that they're going to have to deal with at some point.
So I guess also we have to look at how these companies, not just Twitter, we can expand a little bit to how social media companies have done moderation in the past. There's a good article from 2017 which took 49 Facebook decisions, moderation by the moderation team, and on review of that, when the publication in question brought these to Twitter, 22 were wrong. Like 22, the Facebook admitted, oh, we did this wrong. Only 19 of them did they say, oh, we defend our moderation team here. 6 were unclear, and 2 just I don't know what those were, but the majority were wrong. Okay, so we look at who's making these moderation decisions. They're not good. In fact, if you look at these things, when we talk about like
is Facebook, Twitter,
they're social media companies, and the moderation team on
so
Twitter.
all
I don't have
social
data
media
on
companies
that.
are going to have the
Do you
exact
think
same.
Let me ask you this, Madeline. Do you think Twitter does moderation well?
I mean, I don't, but my point isn't that. I was just saying, like, the Facebook thing is
Okay, so you
irrelevant.
acknowledge
Facebook,
that
though.
Twitter doesn't do moderation well, right? Like currently it's shit at it.
Well, I would prefer not to see the N word, like, kind of unleashed upon the masses,
Again,
just
like,
to promote.
you
white
don't like
supremacy.
how
So,
it's
yeah.
done currently.
Yeah,
Yes?
I'm very happy to say that. Yeah, sure.
Yes, fair enough. And that's the problem here, right? Like whenever we have any kind of group or team doing these moderation and deciding what is allowed and what is not allowed, it's going to run into problems. People tend not to do it well. We all want free speech for ourselves, but we never want to give free speech to other people, right? We're always very willing to vend our own free speech when it's time for us to stand up for the causes we believe in. But historically, I think, and especially in social media companies, like it has, like, censorship has been used to support the status quo across the board. And if that status quo happens to be anti-LGBT, that's usually what happens, right? Or if the status quo happens to be anti-leftist causes, it's going to get censored. We know this because it's happened before. Look at the uprisings in a lot of these countries. Censorship from these groups of groups speaking out against their governments on social media has been banned, right? They've been moderated for advocating for very leftist positions of freedom for these countries.
Well, let's
Yeah.
let's avoid crossing like over into the government restricting speech versus a company restricting.
But these companies, what I'm saying is the company, Twitter specifically, is censoring these things because the government puts pressure on them to do so.
Well, I think that, like, no matter what, if we don't have to worry as much about government influence with US companies. A lot of these companies, when they end up opening up their doors in like China or whatever, they end up having to conform to their standards and giving them control over things so that they can lock down the speech. So I still wouldn't like cross into that territory because it's like apples and oranges, if that makes sense.
Wick,
I mean, I don't want to. I would actually say that there's a lot of governments that are, like, able to actually actively censor using businesses, right? Like China, for example.
Yeah.
I mean,
if we're talking about like Twitter, most of what we're talking about here with the freedom of speech stuff is probably going to apply mostly to countries that also honor a more open-ended form of speech. So the U.S. and Canada would be a great example of that, right? So if we start getting into like governments locking down the speech, well, Twitter's probably going to face that as well, as long as they want to remain active in China or something.
Well, it's also Europe, right? So like one of the recent things that's come up is Europe is basically telling him, well, no, you got to follow our rules too, and this is the governments of Europe saying this, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the government's absolutely having an input here, which is.
Yeah. So that's going to be, so it's going to be hard to like argue that, because no matter what, those countries have got some control over who's allowed to operate within their country's domain of the internet, right? So probably better to just kind of stick this down to what Elon Musk wants to accomplish within countries that have much more liberated speech. So specifically the US. It makes it a lot easier to discuss this kind of thing.
Certainly.
So I always think I'm kind of confused as to what, or I'm just not following your argument, I guess, as well. So you're saying, like, I think we can all agree, right? There are mistakes in content moderation, especially on these large social media platforms. It's like notoriously a problem on Facebook. Like evasion of their TOS is pretty easy. Twitter is like seems haphazard with what counts as like, you know, threats of violence, for example, and what doesn't. So yeah, I think we can all come up with examples of mistakes in content moderation or inconsistent content moderation. But does that, like, are you suggesting then that like maybe we should move away from content moderation at all? Or like, I guess I'm just not like kind of seeing the
Okay,
next
yeah, so
thing.
let me be more clear with my argument. Yes, my advocacy here is for less moderation in general. Like, I wouldn't say no or free of all moderation in general. Like, I would still ban, for example, direct calls to violence, and things like that. I think that also there's an argument, I don't know how convinced, like, I'm wishy-washy on this one, but of certain slurs and words like that. Like, I go back and forth. But at the end of the day, I think that what I advocate mostly for is the ability to espouse ideas, even noxious ones, and not be censored for it. So, for example, if you wanted to do something like if you wanted to argue for a racist idea, I think you should be able to do so without being censored.
Well, what if that includes the implication of violence? Let's say not direct calls for violence, but let's say that their argument is to you know, throw a bunch of people into a camp and exterminate them. What if that's their racist ideology, right?
Like, are they espoused
like Nazis, right?
Okay. Well, I think that when it comes down to it, like, you have to be very specific in what you want there, because that same argument could be made for people who say eat the rich, for example. Like, are they literally calling for the rich to be cannibalized and eaten? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so, right? I don't think that's a thing. But I think that it will all come down to who is making these decisions in the end. Who is deciding what is an implication of direct violence and what is not?
I mean,
and
I just want to add, so Wick, I agree with you completely on the idea of less content moderation to the point of being able to express noxious ideas. I think that it's very similar to, in a lot of Elon Musk's public posts, he refers to Twitter and primarily Twitter, but I'm assuming just general social media as the new public square. And, you know, people think that this is a bad comparison, but, you know, there are, like, especially when there's a stay-at-home order, I mean, your only option for the public square could, in a lot of countries, could be social media. Like, that is the only option you have to express yourself in a public manner. And, you know, case law is replete on, like, what is allowed an expression in the public square. Now, this is obviously different because you have, you know, the public square in this case is overseen by a private corporation. But if the private corporation is saying, like, look, we want to make this kind of closer to this idea of the public square where people can express themselves in a public manner, even if some people find it a little bit disgusting. I mean, there's a reason why America allowed this for hundreds of years, right? And hopefully continues to allow it, because there is a value in not pushing people with radical ideas into places where they're not able to be expressed.
I'm sorry. Did you say that the reason? Why America has allowed, like, what, noxious ideas to be discussed in the public square for hundreds of years? I mean, like, we've only just dealt with Jim Crow like 50 years ago, right? Like, half the reason why noxious ideas were being discussed in the public square is because everybody was a fan of it, right? Like, it's not a situation where
the noxious ideas have changed over time, right? The initial noxious idea has been, let's get rid of let's get away from King George. That was the first noxious idea that, like, people didn't want people talking about in the public square. But then enough people realized, like, no, we have to talk about this. We shouldn't be under the tyranny of a monarch.
Actually, like, I don't think the initial aim was to actually escape British rule. It was something quite different, and it kind of fell into that. But whatever.
His point, though, his larger point, though, holds true, is that the things that were viewed as noxious back then, or we would consider human rights today.
So George Washington didn't put down Shays' Rebellion then.
But what are you
for
talking
example?
about?
Literally, there was a group of
moderation of.
They call it Shays' Rebellion, but, like, the whole point was that, like, they didn't want to pay taxes without representation, and then it was like literally the exact same like battle cry that the revolutionaries had done, like, you know, a decade before, and then instead of letting them have their free speech, George Washington rounded up the troops and then put all these people down. So, like, what do you mean? Like, the free speech is not something we've consistently embraced for hundreds of years.
It also took us a lot of time to get to the point of having the Bill of Rights, right? So we didn't have the Bill of Rights from day one.
No, the Bill of Rights existed. The Bill of Rights existed during this time. It was there. It was in the everything.
No,
like, this was President George Washington.
Look, like Madlad, I would agree with you. You could point to a lot of points in history where America has failed to uphold its ideas.
Yeah, America's done a terrible job of this free speech stuff.
To uphold its ideas, but it's the ideal in itself isn't bad because America failed to uphold it.
No, of course not. I mean, I just want to say
the ideals are good. The larger point here that's being made is that the ideas of yesterday. The ideas of today we would hold as truth, self-evident, and a good were 50, 100, 200 years ago considered blasphemy, considered heretical, considered noxious.
By the way, the Bill of Rights was ratified a year after George Washington left office.
I have a modern day example.
So we did not have freedom of speech at the time.
I have a modern day...
I was pretty sure that was the case. So,
hold on. This is interesting. I apologize if I did not.
Yeah.
So a modern day example of a so-called noxious idea, which I actually do think can be noxious, is in the United States, more people believe in illegalizing the burning of the American flag than people who believe in keeping it legal, right? So if it was put to a vote, it would be illegal to burn the American flag. But we have this idea where, the mob rule of we think this is bad, so you shouldn't be able to do it. Well, no, like if you buy your own American flag and you burn it, this is you expressing yourself. This is protected expression, even if you don't like it, even if I don't like it, which I don't, right? But yet we just came off of not just came off of, but we had a summer of protests, Black Lives Matter, where they were burning flags in some of these protests, and they had the right to. Of course they have the right to. And if it was censored, it'd be ridiculous. By a private or public entity.
So this is a good reason why we should allow people to state things we consider misinformation, like Mad Lad just did here. So we could effectively push back against it and show him why he's dead wrong. Right,
well, right, and that's fine. So like
we've just done here right now today. We've shown it. We've proved it, gang.
Right, but here's the problem though. Like what we're talking about, we're treating all discourse as like 1 or 0, whether we should talk about it or not. Like we're drawing hard lines. Like okay, we shouldn't talk about we should censor calls to violence, and then you're kind of iffy on whether slurs should be censored or not. And like every discourse is like on a spectrum. So like me thinking that Shays Rebellion happened in 1794 rather than 1787, for example, which is what happened here, was like my mistake. I got the year wrong, and thus all the implications of that were incorrect. And we did straighten it out, and that's fantastic. Very happy to have that sort of situation occur. However, when we're talking about other forms of discourse, like whether white supremacy is okay, I would say that the spectrum is a little shifted, and it gets us closer and closer to something that should not be talked about out in a public square sort of manner, because a public square often is used as a place for calls to action in the first place. Like the public square, people don't just debate in the public square back and forth with to no effect. Back in the day when people were doing things in the public square is because you wanted to gather a mass of individuals to do something. That was the whole fucking point.
I mean, yeah, you're trying to convince people, right? That's part of the reason you're putting it to a public test. I think
what Matt Ladden is saying is kind of dangerous. We should probably mute him for the rest of the stream.
Yeah. I think
1,000 bits from the audience, by the way. You downloaded 1,000 bits. I am muted.
Going back to Wick's thing about less moderation, not more. I think I have some overlap with H9 on this, where I'm kind of fond of platforms like Patreon, or like Reddit to me stands out as an example of what I'm envisioning, where on a broad scale, the platform as a whole doesn't. Obviously, there are things that are illegal, things that they've decided just aren't going to be on the platform, but the actual level of site-wide content moderation is relatively hands-off, and then the content moderation is normally handled in smaller communities. I kind of favor that sort of arrangement, right, where you have a broader kind of free speech norm, where it's within this for us, the United States, within the United States, we have this free speech norm, but I wouldn't expect you, if I waltzed into a mosque and started saying horrifically Islamophobic things, like I would expect them to kind of like escort me out as quickly as possible, right? Like that's not my place and that's not my space, and they can moderate what goes on in their areas, right? And so like I that's the sort of world that I envision as being more productive, where Twitter is, I just think, is always going to not be productive. Whatever sort of content moderation you have, whether it's slightly less than what we have now or slightly more than what we have now, whether Elon Musk owns it or Saudi princes own it, it's just a shitty place to be. It's just like it's wild west of discourse, and it's never going to be fun or productive.
Maybe it'll get better in some ways. Maybe it'll get better. You don't know.
Yeah, I agree with the idea that individual users should have moderation tools for themselves. So if they personally do not want to see something, or they don't want to participate in certain discourse, I'm all for having tools for blocking people, for banning people from your own private Discord communities or what have you.
Twitter already has that, so what's the point?
Those things are good. I think that people should use them more instead of, like, if you don't like what is being said, if you think something is a noxious or an odious idea that you think is harmful, block them. You don't have to see it then. But what I find as a harmful and actually going to do harm to society is when we decide we can advocate for what is a good and a good not idea that other people should or should not be.
I mean, it's not good. It's not measuring whether an idea is good enough or not. It's like, how bad is the idea? Like, how dangerous is the take? Like, Donald Trump didn't get removed from Twitter until he subverted the actual Constitution, trying to like hold on to power, right?
Well, and they waited until he had left office to even do it,
right? Like, socialism was considered
That's a whole
dangerous.
Other debate.
In fact, right wingers in a lot of cases are pushing the idea that talking about being gay in the classroom or things is a dangerous idea that they want to censor and ban. Mm-hmm. This is why we should be opposed to censorship, is because, again, like you said,
a school is a institution, right? Like it's a government institution and not like a
we're not talking about platforms, but I guess he's using it as an example of what can happen when you have regulations.
Sure, but
it's also an institution that children have to go to. I think it's a little bit different than Twitter, which is a voluntary, freedom of expression platform that is primarily made up of adults. I think that there is probably like a justification to restrict content given to children, but not to adults.
But there is, but the larger point here, as Zonia said, is an example of what happens when the people in power decide that your idea is noxious or dangerous to them, right? And again, every idea is dangerous in its place and its time. The ideas of social liberation, of racial equality, are dangerous to white supremacists, right? They're dangerous to that worldview. And when you look at it from that way, it depends on who's deciding who's dangerous. And that's the biggest problem with these things, when we come to content moderation, is who makes these decisions.
Well, it's a matter. So the thing is, again, like every discourse is on a spectrum, right? So like you're trying to make like this false equivalence between like the civil rights era movement and like, white supremacists trying to make a comeback right now. Like,
I mean, you can say it's a false equivalence, but that is like the substantive point is like if you put these tools in the hands of a state actor or in the hands of institutions like or private platforms, like as soon as the power shifts, as soon as it's the people you like or dislike, it changes, right? So I mean, you can make that like normative argument that yes, obviously it is substantively different. The people arguing in favor of black liberation and civil rights are substantively different than like modern day white supremacists. I think all of us would agree on that, but the issue is the mechanisms you have to suppress the things that go against the current moment. Yeah.
Well, right. So I guess like my point here is that since everything is on a spectrum of some sort, we don't have to do this like sort of all or nothing approach in terms of deciding whether or not something should or should not be censored. Like, right. I think
just if you like it, it's not, and if you dislike it, it is.
I mean, no, it doesn't have to be like a like it or dislike it. I think we can like literally look at like what the like do some impact and like determine like the harms caused by the speech being free, right? Like, maybe in terms of like, there's some very specific instances where like free speech causes suicide, right? Like, there's some people who have like killed themselves over the types of things that they've encountered on the internet. So the question is, should those actors who said those very toxic things that weren't necessarily slurs or calls to action, who still caused like a death, have the right to continue to speak?
Well, I mean, we
Of
have legal
course.
definitions of harassment, and we can prosecute people for
Yeah,
that.
so
I mean,
we've got,
already
like,
have this
some
case of the girl who bullied the guy into killing himself and
right.
got prosecuted
So
for it. Yeah, so we don't necessarily need to like have some broad
so we have
scale
some
moderation against anything that could
well,
potentially be psychologically
right.
harmful to somebody.
So we're, I mean, I guess we could like rely on institutional recourse in the law to like resolve all of that, but like it's in a private business's interest not to platform speech that would cause that sort of act to occur, right?
Mad lad, I can think of an example right now in which you would
Mhm.
agree, like it'd be ridiculous even if it did cause a suicide. What if like I'm really into Nietzsche or something, and I like, or some philosopher who's like a nihilist, or maybe even a
Mhm.
philosopher who's like life doesn't matter or something, and then I'm like, oh, this is really interesting writing, and then I send it to my friend who reads it, totally becomes blackpilled and then kill themselves, right? Well, did I cause them to commit suicide? Kinda, because I sent them that information, I sent them those thoughts and that
I mean,
expression,
it's
which
kind of
led to that
a
action. Right,
right.
but
So it'd
but,
be
but like
like,
I think that if somebody is genuinely trying to express an idea, right, and it's not like, I think that there's a difference between trying to express like a ideological idea and like an intent to action. I think there is a difference there. We can try to draw like delineation lines there, but
well, I mean, I guess I could go in a direction that's like not individualist, right? Like where someone isn't like bullied as an individual, but like bullied as like an entire like class, right? Like folks who aren't heteronormative who kill themselves because, you know, all these people share their hate and share their vitriol and share their like uncensored expression of distaste, right? So like,
Much
are
more
we going to
and
argue that that's the
complicated than
same
that,
thing?
but
Well, I mean, are we going to say that? Well, I mean, is that? I'm sorry. That's an interrupt zone. Yeah, I apologize. I feel like you have some strong opinions here. I'm just saying that, like, is that the same thing as like passing around, like, I'm not gonna get the year right for Nietzsche. 19th century, 18th? No, 19th century works around, and then talking about like these ideals that like might blackpill someone, but like even if it did, it would take decades before any direct harm was caused by exposure, I would say.
not necessarily. If you've got like if you got a group of people who are depressed and are already like vulnerable to these kind of thoughts, and then you show them these thoughts and they go through it and they realize, yeah, life doesn't matter. Like maybe this will lead to them killing themselves. Does this mean we have to, we should ban these books? We should say you're not allowed to express nihilism?
I mean,
think
I
that'd be pretty
really don't want to
ridiculous.
get into. Well, I don't want to get into the actual numbers here. I feel like it's ridiculous to actually have to do this, but I guess like just to make the point, I think there's a statistic. Like statistically speaking, there's probably a lot more people who've killed themselves because of the one rather than the other, right?
well, it's a
Like,
hypothetical that he's
sure.
trying to use that you
yeah,
can relate to.
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
it's
like what
hypothetical I can
standard are
relate
you
to,
going
but,
to adopt that is going to consistently apply across these cases, right? What standard are you going to adopt of content moderation that's going to say, well, in this and this and this cases where somebody is psychologically harmed to the point of then harming themselves, well, that's the kind of thing that we're not going to allow.
I mean, the
But
thing
then
is,
it
like, the
doesn't
standards.
turn about on me for things that somebody else might find harmful that I think are perfectly acceptable, right?
Well, like all
Right.
moderation is like on a case by case basis. You can't handle every single case identically. That's why you have arbiters and judges to make determinations as to what's okay and what's not okay. So,
Right,
like,
then
if anything,
Wake's
what I would
question,
argue
like, do you make
for.
that a more rigorous regime of individual decision making, like case by case by case by case, each per like the
That's
pylon
more
that
ways to do that.
Elon supposedly started on this lawyer at Twitter, right? Supposedly he started this pylon on her by criticizing her decision regarding the Washington or the New York Post article about Biden's laptop. He started a pylon on Twitter. You're going to go through each and every single individual tweet and the thousands and thousands of tweets that responded to her and decide, does this person have malice or not? Is this
If
likely
we
to
have an
make her kill
interest in
herself or not?
fairness, I mean, if we have an interest in fairness on some level, yeah, we need to actually hire arbiters to go through and do that if we're trying to get like some sense of rigorous like standard, right?
Mad lad.
The
Mad lad, let
thing
me
is,
try
like, I'm
this.
not even going for a rigorous standard here. Like, I'm not even arguing for something like that. All I'm saying is that like some ideas don't need to be fucking platformed, yo. Like that's it.
Mad lad.
And like the only direction that we can make, like making Twitter a more free place, the only group that's actually going to get any sort of benefit right now at this moment are going to be white supremacists in the far right. Those are the only individuals being banned from Twitter in the first place.
But the thing is, so sorry to cut in front of you, Wick, but
That's not true.
this is something that that Elon Musk has even brought up, is that a lot more of the far right and the far left are going to end up getting the beat down based on this. So I don't know how that's going to actually play out
How
in
is the, wait, I'm
execution, but
sorry.
that's what he claims.
He claimed, okay, so Elon Musk is claiming that this is going to be really, really good, but like how? How is the far right going to get a greater beatdown?
I don't know.
When they're reintroduced to Twitter. Like, so, and to be clear, like my position on censorship is that just deplatforming isn't enough, right? Like if you deplatform people and you put them into a corner somewhere, I feel like it operates sort of similar to like how the prison system in the US works, where you take like, you know, non-violent offenders, put them in the same jails as like, you know, real criminals, and then you're going to have a lot of people who come out as real criminals, right? Like in the same sense, you could take a whole bunch of people who are like, you know, not the worst of the worst, deplatform them, and the next thing you know, they'll be like lying in the bed with like actual white supremacists and then getting white supremacists pilled, right? So like, I don't think that deplatforming is always the right choice and is always a good thing. I only think that deplatforming is the right choice when they're saying something that's so egregious and so harmful that, like, you know, it's unquestionable. And B, you have some sort of like way of interacting with that individual after the fact, aftercare, if you will, where you can actually kind of like, you know, help walk someone away from their extremism.
So you've illustrated perfectly, I think, why free speech is dangerous, but censorship is even more dangerous. Right? It's levels of harm when it comes to things. And let me ask you this, Mad Lad, and maybe this will make it very clear why this is a big problem that I don't think you're able to address with your arguments here. Do you believe in systemic racism? Yes or no?
Systemic racism does exist, yes.
Yes, it does exist. We know that because of the implicit bias in people and in systems, that it leads us to discriminate more against minorities and things, at least in America, right? And since we're talking about America and a Twitter-based company, I think that it stands to reason that historical precedent will be followed, and that the people who will be hit by the most bans, the people who will be hit the most when it comes to censorship, are going to be minorities and other people who have systemically biased against them. We can even look at this in Facebook's way of doing things. I hate to bring Facebook.
Really? I mean, like literally, you can look at like who's been banned from Twitter like now, like literally, and you can see that it's mostly white supremacists. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
So there was a big purge, but this inevitably can move. Well, I don't know about inevitably, but this can easily move in a direction that does penalize minorities who are trying to talk about important things. And then an example of this would actually be to look at Twitch. Now, Twitch is much more aggressive with its censorship, but I can't talk about issues of self-harm, which is an important issue for the trans community, because we start getting into territory that gets so risky and violates their TOS, where you can't encourage self-harm. But the problem is that people who hate trans people go and mass report the VODs and the streams of people like myself who will talk about like an issue of self-harm and report it as encouraging self-harm. And even though I'll go and I'll say like, hey, can you please, I'll dispute it and want them to review it and everything. If the VOD is really long and we're talking about self-harm, they'll go and like skip through it and scan through it, and they'll find parts where we're talking about like somebody killed themselves, or hurt themselves, right, and stuff like that. And then they're like, no, we're upholding the moderation, right? So that's where you end up with a situation where a group of people who hates a minority group, a marginalized group, gets motivated, goes and mass reports somebody based on this moderation policy that they've got, like encouraging self-harm, and it gets taken down. And I've also had tweets that were taken down that weren't encouraging anything at all, but were moderated because of that, and or something similar to that. And so it will eventually have blowback and will negatively impact the people whose voices need to be heard in order to help bring attention to a very serious problem for a marginalized group.
Right, and that's like the point, right? Well, no, but see, like that's the point, right? Like,
wait, can I hop on what Wick said a little bit?
I just want to let me just piggyback off of what Zonia said, because this is important, right?
I want to
like we're talking about like, yeah, Twitch is a lot more restrictive than Twitter is, and so like I entirely agree that what Twitch does in terms of its like enforcement policies is like somewhat arbitrary, complete nonsensical, and like they don't have enough arbiters to make determinations. My point isn't to make Twitter more censored. My point is just leave Twitter as is. There's no need to free Twitter any more than what it is. Like, I'm not arguing that we need to increase the level of censorship on Twitter. I'm arguing against any of the fucks who think that Elon Musk is going to like freeing Twitter in some way is actually somehow beneficial to the discourse, because the discourse on Twitter is already the Wild West. Like, we've already covered that.
But I've even had some tweets taken down that were what I call false flagged, right? Because they should have been allowed. I wasn't like encouraging any self-harm or anything. I was actually trying to make a good point about something, but it was intentionally flagged as being something that was, you know, negative and attacking someone or something, right? So that's, I've even had a few tweets taken down over the years, like 2 of them, I think. So it's not a big deal, but still, that was the case.
2 tweets across how many years? Just out here, I don't know.
Well, I didn't tweet much until very recently, so not all that much. I only really ramped up recently. I've been on Twitter since 2008, but I didn't really start doing anything on it until the last year. Now, the problem is that inevitably these things always move in a more restrictive direction over time. If your policy is moderation, inevitably moderation gets more and more restrictive over time. That's the pattern that we've seen with every single platform, every single situation, right? No matter what, they always become more restrictive, not less restrictive. So you either need to have a very, very firm line in the sand and have a very clearly stated like mission statement for the company. We are mostly hands off, almost no moderation, and that's our company policy. Or if you start saying that, oh, we need to worry about like harmful speech, right? Well, then the problem is that the category that or the umbrella of that, what it covers, grows over time. More things get inserted into it over time, as it is argued that more and more things are harmful. So inevitably moderation always goes in a more restrictive direction over time. So inevitably you will see that down the road, or it's very likely you will see that down the road.
I absolutely agree with that. Right? I think moderation does get more restrictive over time.
All right, can I build off what Wick said a little bit earlier? So minorities are getting the short end of the sticks, but you think American minorities are getting the short end of the stick. It's not true. American minorities are the most protected minorities in the world. Truly, it's sub-Saharan Africa. So in 2019, I know this is Facebook, but they're Facebook, Twitter, same company, same thing. Deactivated 60 activist accounts that were involved in the Ethiopian civil war. And that's just because it's not profitable or well managed enough for Facebook to give a crap about moderation efforts in these countries or for these problems. So when we're talking about adding more censorship or making it stronger, I think we got to be well aware of these drawbacks. And just one last point, the main reason these companies do moderation is ads. We cannot forget that. They are an ad-based business. Their money is coming from ads. Go ahead.
I mean, so like, yeah, Facebook and other social media companies have a tendency to, in foreign lands, restrict the speech of activists, especially in favor of authoritarian governments, so they can, like, maintain their presence in these countries. And yeah, that's like a really bad problem. And I agree, but like, how does that relate to regulating or deregulating these platforms in the United States? It's not like abracadabra deregulating Facebook in the United States is going to do anything for the activists overseas. And on top of that, it's not going to necessarily make these platforms more safe if the United States took a tyrannical turn. Like, it doesn't change anything.
But if all of a sudden
public versus private, right?
But if Facebook or Twitter all of a sudden tomorrow said we're going to have a more or less censored stance in our company, they may not take that phone call or the order from that government to ban those 60 activists.
They may not. Like, what do you like? How do you decide?
They may not. No one can answer this question. No one could go see into the future and see what a multi-billion-dollar company is going to do. So of course they may not.
I'm just saying, like, this argument seems very like kind of superfluous. Like, it's just like it doesn't feel very like it doesn't feel tangible, right? Like. I don't like these things are not inherently related. We're talking about like authoritarian governments shutting down activists in their countries because they are trying to avoid civil strife and hold on to power. Because
of the censorship the company wants to do. We're talking about how
the company doesn't want to do it. The authoritarian government is pressuring these companies into doing it. And if you have Facebook deregulate, There's no reason why an authoritarian United States can't say, hey, Facebook, I need you to get your act together, otherwise we're canceling you. Like, it doesn't change any fucking thing at all. They're not going to be more resistant. They're just going to get replaced. Like, it doesn't change anything.
We kind of have the opposite issue right now where Facebook is lax in their moderation towards political actors in places like Myanmar because of the large user base there, right? So they're making tons of money off of them. They could enforce their TOS against these people. Like they're banning political pages or banning political ads or banning people for certain calls to political violent action, but they're not with this user base because it's such a strong majority of their user base right now and they're making so much money off of them. So I don't really know if
because the teeth of Myanmar is different from the teeth of, like, say, Middle East countries where, like, I think it was like Tunisia, I think Syria, a bunch of different Middle East countries during the Arab Spring forced social media companies to turn off location tracker so that folks couldn't gather to do like actual like organization, right?
Can I ask you a question, Mad Lad? Maybe bring this back onto the Twitter specifically.
Yeah,
I want to go back to Twitter too. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. Out of the Elon stated goals here, what exactly do you have a problem with?
Do
you know what he's actually wanting to do, or have you just read a bunch of stuff on Twitter of people freaking out?
He's talked about like besides the edit button, he wants to make it impossible to trace where tweets come from. He wants to do like this kind of I forgot what it's called, but I think this is like the thing that really like made me. And to be clear, like my passion here, like on any level, is like if I had to pick something that I like give a fuck about, like this is like maybe one step over. I'm just gonna like see what happens. Like I don't think a billionaire buying a company, like just outright and then like doing top down changes is a good thing whatsoever, right? Like I think it's really, really bad for the workers at the company. I think, as Hilary said. I mean, no, like a lot of the time it actually just like, turns into a fucking clusterfuck. Like I can't think of a single example of like a eccentric billionaire buying something and then magically transforming it into like, the Willy Wonka factory or some shit, right? Like that just doesn't, that's not how this works usually. Okay, we're gonna have a separate conversation about Tesla, but like my point.
I don't like Tesla. I'm just saying that's sort of what he's done, at least in the popular imagination.
Well, I mean, what I will say with Tesla, what I really approved of with Elon Musk is that he took all his patents and like released them, like his car battery patents, as a means of spreading the technology, but then also like it was a smart business plan because it would encourage a lot of people to start using electric cars.
Just to
like stuff like that's like really, really cool.
Because you said a lot of words, Bad Lad, but
yeah.
So what I got out of all that is you're worried because it'll disrupt the business.
Well, if I had to pick one tangible concern. If I had to pick one tangible concern...
please, any tangible concern, please.
Well, don't pretend that I didn't offer actual like responses.
You said no. It will disrupt the business.
I'm sorry. I've been actually like I keep being like interruptible. I'm like offering my response. So like, don't pretend that like I'm just talking out my ass this whole fucking time. Thank you. No, my point here, in terms of like the most tangible point that I could make about Elon Musk buying this company and it being a bad thing, is that it will undermine the business and it will put people out of work. I 1000% think that's what's going to happen here because he's offering top-down solutions to problems that don't even fucking exist. He wants to encrypt communication for end to end on the platform. Like something that's like I don't even know if he's aware of how and like I don't know how this works either. But like I do wonder if he's aware of how the technology in Twitter works and how hard it is to implement some of these ideas that he has.
Well, I mean, if anything, that's actually going to create more jobs to solve those problems.
Not necessarily. Actually, the problem in a lot of these companies, these tech companies, is this thing called crunch, where people are expected to do a lot of very difficult things under like a really short period of time because, the person at the top said, hey, I've got this great idea. Let's implement it next week.
Well, I work in tech and I work in social media specifically, but...
so you're telling me that that's not a problem?
Well, like startups are like that, but Twitter isn't a startup. Twitter is a well-established.
Twitter's going to be treated like a startup once Elon Musk buys it, though, is it not?
he may end up in
No.
sort of infusing some more like innovative energy, but it's not a startup because it
And I
actually
mean,
does
Blizzard
have,
had the same problem too.
well, because
And that's
it
like an
does have
established
the
company
capital, but it does have the capital. Well, game companies you can't compare. That's not a tech company. Game companies are vastly different in how they operate and how many employees that they have, like full-time employees. Now, tech companies, especially Twitter, which is here where I live, they're a well-established, larger company now, and they've got the capital. So Elon Musk may infuse it with that newer kind of like, let's innovate a lot more kind of energy, and he may get a lot of pushback from the different teams that are saying like, we don't have what it takes to do it. But the difference is that he will, well, assuming that he doesn't tank the value of the company and lose its revenue streams right off the bat, he can afford to hire on the teams and the personnel to try to solve those problems. So it's not an actual startup. Like a startup would actually have these growing pains because they wouldn't have the capital to do that, and they'd have a very small employee base in the first place. Now, the one problem that I have, the big concern that I have with Elon Musk taking it over, is that Elon Musk hasn't run a software as a service or a platform as a service, right? This is something that's very unique. It's a very unique way of operating. This is the business that I've been working in for the past 15 years. And and I've seen the situation where you get like a hot shot CEO coming in who comes in from like hardware tech, or from software tech, physical software tech, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna do things totally different now. I've got this experience. They come in all gung-ho, and then they're trying to run a software as a service or a platform as a service, and they just piss off everybody and ends up with bad morale in the company because this guy is way overconfident, has no idea how this type of business works, and is just doing a bunch of dumb shit. That's the one concern that I really have.
How is that different from what I was like suggesting? I'm like, okay, it's fine.
Well,
Okay,
because it's
not necessarily free speech concerns.
Yeah, well,
he can-
exactly. Thank you.
He can get them the resources necessary so long as he doesn't destroy the existing revenue streams, right? But there's a chance that he can start coming in as sort of like a misinformed manager, which is part of your concern. But
that's what I was talking about, yeah.
But
yeah,
but the technological problems can actually be solved with the revenue stream and the fact that they already have a very large employee base.
I am sure that the technology, I'm sure it can be solved. I'm just not confident.
Let me step in. Yeah. So I want to give credit, Mad Lad, for that being your biggest problem here with what Elon is proposing. But I think if we're going to be honest about what most people's problems are with Elon Musk buying this platform, it is the changes to censorship and the proposal of trying to make this into a free speech platform. That's why it's in the question prompt that Prime gave. Like this is what most people are concerned about, right? It's not like, is Twitter gonna like go bankrupt? Like what about the employees? Like the society at large isn't concerned with that as much as they are concerned with the idea of, here's a major public platform. What are going to be the changes about what I'm going to see on there? What am I going to be able to post on there? And I think the reason why there's a lot of pushback is there's a lot of people, and this is just, I'm going to make the assertion, I guess, like more lefty types who do see censorship as a useful tool to creating a kind of public space that they would like to be in, right? And there's a lot of conservatives who are spurned by that because either they've been moderated or they've had like people who they respect moderated, and they would like to see their public square, a little bit more open, right? And they're more willing to see people of different ideological viewpoints on that public platform.
Well, that's not necessarily true at all. They will be very happy to insist on moderation for folks that they don't like either. Like at least.
But you say this, but I don't believe it, because I don't believe it because the far right social media platforms like Gab and all those like super far right ones, like from the very foundation, they always say like anybody's welcome here. Like
they always say that, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and they tend to follow through on that.
No, it's been tested because there were people going in, testing it out, and saying like anti-Christian things and contesting conservative views that were getting banned. So, but with Gab specifically. So it doesn't.
Everybody wants a
it-
platform that's tailored to their
yeah,
ideological things. And like,
exactly.
Okay,
and so like Wick,
so
and Wick
the
made a
best
good point
example.
in saying that. Like Wick is accurate in saying that everybody wants their own perfect, beautiful, like, you know, world where they can talk about the things they think are okay and the thing, and like, you know, ban the things that they
okay,
don't
so
think are okay.
to the extent in which maybe the right is censorious, right? I disagree. I would disagree with that, and but I think if we're going to be honest, on major social media platforms where especially the moderation teams is overwhelmingly dominated by left-leaning, software engineers on the coasts. I think this is where the problem lies. And
So we're going to use stereotypes to justify your point now? Is that your plan?
The companies
You
are
can
being headed
look-
up by
you can
more
look-
libertarian types.
No, you can
So-
look at like the actual, like in terms of donor money, like per employee by company. I mean, you can see how these companies
but like,
lean.
that's not why
Well,
the censorship is even happening.
in the
It takes
board-
like
That's why they want it.
But the
They want it
board-
because they
that's
want a
not-
public
the
square.
board-
That's not
that
no, that's
represents-
not.
Okay,
Of course
now
they
I
are.
have an issue.
No,
now I have a question for
Gamergate, yo.
Lacto.
Like, what the fuck
Yeah,
is like?
same.
Now I
Do
have a
we
question for
do we
Lacto.
know? No, I mean, do we know
Lacto,
why
are you
Twitter actually
seriously
has any
arguing-
standards?
Just real quick.
Okay,
Lacto, are you seriously
Matt
arguing
Latin,
that the
you don't
right
have to-
isn't
hold on.
censorious?
No,
Like,
hold
you
on,
can
hold
look
on.
and
Hey,
point to the.
Can you hear me? Yeah, Mad Lad,
Hi.
like knock it off. You don't have to yell and scream, please. All right. Go ahead, Wick. You can. Lacto, I haven't heard from you in a while. I want to make sure you have room to talk about anything. All right, go
Thank
ahead,
you,
Wick.
Brian.
Okay. Yeah, my question is to Lactoid. When you say that the right isn't censorious, like I can point to plenty of examples in the 90s, the 2000s and things where the right was, I would consider, the driving force behind censorship, right? Like when we look at violence in video games and things like that, it was largely the right of center that was pushing these things. Now you can argue that that has shifted in recent years, yes, and I would say yes, but that's mostly because the left has the levers of power now. It seems to me that whoever it is, right or left or center, who happens to hold those levers of institutional power tends to want to censor their political enemies. This is just a human thing. It's not a left thing or a right thing. It's a human thing, right? Like, and so I would take contention with this assertion that the right isn't censorious. I just
Yeah.
disagree.
I
Okay,
agree with
so
Wick.
that's a very fair contention. Okay, I have two responses. First, absolutely, you're correct. In the 90s and in the past, the right was the problem. Okay, especially when it comes to violent video games, violent movies. Yeah, for sure, no doubt. And religious censorship. I mean, that was more widespread. Marilyn Manson caught a lot of brunt of that. I mean, of course. I am arguing that it's changed, and I'm also arguing that I think that the mentality of the right, at least the mainstream right, has shifted a little bit on this issue. I think that, and maybe it's because like they're losing ground on some issues. I don't know, but I think the right these days is a lot more open to the idea of freedom of expression than the left is. Now, maybe you could say that's because of the changing of the gears of power, but I also think that I'm not sure that's 100% true, because there is sort of been a migration, I think, from like for libertarians, right? This idea of, keep the government away from me, to the right. I think away a little bit from the left as they were in the 70s and the 80s. And I think we're kind of bringing the pro freedom of speech attitudes with us. And obviously, are there people who disingenuously argue in favor of free speech just because they want their ideas platformed? They don't actually want other ideas platformed. Sure. But I just, maybe I don't have empirical evidence for it, but I'm getting the feeling that's not the case. And regardless, though, the current problem, especially when it comes to Twitter or other social media, it's not the right in terms of censoring people. It's just not.
Yeah, but again, I would argue that's only because the right isn't the ones in charge, right? Like I think that
like the example I gave with Gab.
it stands to reason that the people who are not in power will advocate more for free speech because they're the ones that stand to benefit from it the most. I think that's a thing that we could just cede to, correct?
Yeah,
I think it depends on the principles. I do, like Elon Musk, based on his latest cartoon, I guess considers himself part of the right. But like he's really aimed at trying to, at least his stated aims here, are trying to increase freedom of speech on the platform.
Well, he sees himself as still being on the left, but that the left ran away from him, right? So
Which makes him now on the right.
Now, the one thing to keep in mind, and this is something I wanted to correct you on, Lactoid, is that the people in charge of these companies, the board of directors and the investors, actually tend to lean very libertarian. So they tend to be MBAs and they tend to be venture capital appointees and such, right? So those are the people who actually make the decisions on the board of directors. Now, you're correct in that, like, the moderation teams themselves and the engineers tend to lean much more to the left, at least socially, but as well as probably economically in many cases. But the decision making power from the top down still comes from people who tend to be very libertarian. And even though they may be very socially left, they're still very libertarian in nature, which means, allowing basically kind of live and let live in many cases. So a lot of the moderation decisions that are actually happening that you see as being left wing preferred moderation decisions are actually coming from overwhelming social pressure, from a sort of a tide of social pressure being placed on those companies by the more left wing movement of political power, right?
Yes.
So
My
it's,
only
it's, a, it's usually it's like a money thing. It's a survival type thing. It's like, okay, I guess we got to cave to them. Let's do it. Same thing with a lot of the diversification of employee base with these companies. A lot, even though there are people who truly believe, like, yeah, our company is going to be better off having a more diverse employee base. So much of it though comes from social pressure initially, and it needs to be sort of pushed onto them, and then they're like, okay, let's go ahead and do it. There's a big there's momentum in this direction, let's go ahead and do this.
So my only contention with that, real quick, is I don't disagree that obviously there's outside pressures that are pushing a lot of decisions. I don't think we can assume that just because they're venture capitalists that they aren't sort of left leaning, especially when they come from like areas and they run companies that are very left leaning. I mean, I could be wrong on that. I guess the only data I've seen was kind of general company polls and general company like donor information, which seems to indicate that all these companies are extremely left leaning, just in terms of the vast majority of their donations and employee base. In the same way that I would argue like oil companies are almost entirely right wing leaning.
Okay, well, I heard Prime roll his eyes, so Prime, you may as well just jump on.
Prime, can I hop on before you?
Wow.
Please.
All right, to push back on that, there isn't these crazy incentives that the moderation teams are using or the board of directors are using. That's just stupid, like, conspiracy bullshit, actually. The venture capitalists, keyword capitalists, look at their revenues and costs, and that's how they make decisions. They're going to see what ad companies they can sell the most ads to, how many users they can keep on the website, how many times they can get people to click on it. That's their motivation. It isn't some soy political like values things that they're using. No, they're looking at the costs and their revenue. These are the motivating factors. It isn't some like, I'm soying out because like AOC said this and I'm going to go ban this person now. No, this does not happen. These people do not get to make those decisions. Ever.
Well, the social pressure definitely motivates it. It kind of triggers it. But one of the things that's talked about in the companies is talked about how this is something that we've definitely talked about in my company, is that the more diverse the population is in the company, the more that we'll be able
that's
to create
politically
that's
business advantageous. It makes you more money.
What makes you more money because it opens you up better to a broader customer base and purchase and stuff.
I agree, but they're not doing it for some like political like moral reason. They're doing it because it makes them more money.
No, because it starts that way. It always starts with like the social movement that pushes back on them. That's what happened with Google. That's what happened with Microsoft.
Can I ask you, Zonia? Would you say that the current cultural zeitgeist is more left or more right? I would argue it's much more left.
It's much more left.
Yeah.
Yes. The momentum has happened. We're just now it's carried.
It's like maybe a degree separated from the decision-making process, but I think we could all agree here that it's the driving force behind these decisions, because as H9 pointed out, that it just makes them more money when they appeal to whatever is culturally significant.
Yes,
but
thank you.
It took the initial backlash and outcry that motivated. That's the thing that Google did when they finally, when they were the first ones to come out back in 2014 with their whole thing. This is our diversity breakdown, and here's what's going on. Here are our goals. It actually came as a result of a social backlash saying Google is primarily staffed by white.
But that's not from within the company. That's from outside pressures. Those are like people were like, oh, I'm gonna stop watching Google ads, or whatever advertiser is on Google, I'm gonna stop buying their product. Advertisers came down and told Google, you need to be more diversified in your company's hiring policies.
Point out that Prime has no problem with H9 yelling. First of all, second of all, I want to point out that H9 and Zonia, you guys basically disagree. Like, we don't have to talk about the egg and the chicken. Like, it's the same shit. Like, can we just?
I think
like,
it's just to the what degree, but yeah.
I'll disagree. I think.
Cool.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think. Does the customer base drive company decisions? Of course they do. But I think that it seems weird to me how people do accept the fact that, you know, maybe Elon is going to come into power here and make decisions based on his own ideological leanings, but they think it's impossible that, you know, the current leadership and current moderation in these companies don't do the same thing.
I don't think Elon
will
be able to control the company to his ideological whims. He has a $25 billion stake by major banks to not do that. He has his $25 billion. He does not want to lose. He does not want to lose $25 billion. He will keep Twitter profitable and running.
Yeah. So you have the bottom line, and I'm not saying he's gonna, you know, intentionally tank the company. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but I think that it's wrong to assume that people's internal ideological biases don't come out in their work, or don't come out in their judgment calls or their governance decisions.
Are you arguing that systemic racism is a thing?
Look,
is that what you just did?
Yeah, any kind of systemic preference obviously is going to like occur. The question is, do we have a right to like express ourselves or not? That's what this whole discussion has been about. I think people do have a right to express themselves, even if the opinion is noxious, as Wick said, even if that opinion is racist, right? You should have a right to express yourself.
Okay, but before I started frowning, just real quick. So you're acknowledging that systemic racism is a thing, just real quick.
Yeah. Do I acknowledge that people have like racial preferences? Of course. People have gender preferences. People have all sorts of preferences. People have preferences for ice cream.
Systemic.
Okay, it's systemic. Of course it is. People believe it.
Cool. All right. I'm gonna hold on to that later because I'm gonna need it like in a few weeks probably.
So I think that
moving on to the
there's a systemic preference for like whatever the most popular ice cream is.
Systemic implies that the system itself, that there are mechanisms in the system that are upholding racial prejudices or ethnic prejudices, right?
That is part of it. But to get off that line for a minute, we have to really acknowledge that within a company, the moderation team of these things are handled in different ways. Some are micromanaged to a very direct extent by the upper management. Some are allowed their own kind of way of doing these things.
Not at this scale. Not at this scale.
Okay, fair enough. If you know more about this than me, please.
Yeah, like a very, very small startup that's a brand new social media product. Yeah, they would be probably a little bit more micromanaged, or at least it's capable of being. But at this scale, no, there's no way to micromanage it.
So they're left to their own devices, is what you're saying?
There's an overarching policy, but it's mostly going to be automated. And then when there's this dispute, there will be an individual that will look at it, or maybe multiple individuals, depending on the kind of dispute and the company and the product, right? But yeah, it's mostly going to be automated, and then a human looks at it when it's disputed. Sometimes not even when it's disputed.
So one of the tools that certain elements of our society have found very useful in today's culture wars, as they call them, is the ability to mass report and brigade things. Like Zonia talked about the examples when people have mass reported her. And this happens all the time. And because of the automation of these systems in large cases, it's very effective. It works. It's an annoyance for the creators. And I think that this is going down a very dangerous road when we allow these things. I don't know a fix for this, right? Like, I don't have a magic bullet that can solve this issue here. But when you have the ability for sheer numbers to get someone kicked off of a platform. I think that's a terrible precedent, and that's again why I advocate for less heavy-handed moderation of these things, for as little as possible, right? Like I'm not for go wild with everything, right? I think there are again direct calls to violence. Slurs probably should be moderated in some cases, but when it comes to ideas, it's just something we shouldn't do. And that Elon, again, it's telling that the biggest problem that Mad Lad has here is that it might impact their business rather than impact society by allowing more voices.
Is that
right?
more telling than you basically deciding what it should and should not be? Like you're literally making prescriptions for what should be allowed in terms of free speech and what shouldn't. Like what makes your preference superior to anyone else's? You're doing the exact same thing. You're just like being a lot more freer about it and suggesting that, oh, this is what freedom looks like. It's the same shit.
It's
freer. You're just more tolerant.
It's freer.
Yeah, it's freer. Like,
yeah, and you're not actually giving like any sort of like
because the
benefits
freer...
because you're not actually giving you actual like clear benefits either. You're like literally saying,
you want me to explain the benefits of free speech?
No, I mean, no, not the freer speech that you're.
Sure. You want me to explain
suggesting.
why less moderation is a good thing and what benefits it can have to society? I can if you'd like, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
No, I would be very happy to see what you.
Again, every idea that has been controversial, like every great truth that we have had, that the Earth is round and not actually flat. That minorities have rights too. They've started as blasphemy, as heretical positions.
Nobody thought the Earth was flat.
I mean,
oh,
could you say
your point? Your point stands, but nobody thought the Earth was flat.
Okay, you know what I mean, though. Like my point's okay.
Your point stands. I'm sorry. It's just
some people thinking now.
Fair enough.
It's
but this idea,
this
idea again. Every great idea that has one day
every idea that's ever existed
is because free speech was allowed, because this idea was allowed to be discussed. A few times they've tried to suppress it, right? Like look at the Spanish Inquisition. That was censorship to a very extreme degree, where they would torture and kill anyone who didn't toe the line, right? This was a bad thing, but it was not able to suppress these.
So this is not moderation. This is you talking about government suppressing like free speech, which again is just like different. But going back to like this whole thing of free speech being like inherently good.
The government,
like every idea that's ever existed has been suppressed in one way or another throughout time. So just like pointing to the good ideas and saying, look at all these good ideas that have been suppressed, like fails to acknowledge that a lot of bad ideas are also suppressed for a good reason, right? And like just suggesting that, like, but you look at this half,
you know what is
like
good
this
and bad before you discuss it is asinine. The idea that you can tell the difference between good idea and bad idea before it's allowed to stay in court.
I mean, the thing is, like a lot of these ideas have had their day in court. A lot of these ideas have been, like World War II is like,
in front of me.
World War II itself was like a lash against, is a huge example of why white supremacy is bad, right? The Jim Crow era is a whole like realm of like historical example of why white supremacy is bad. And you're telling me that it hasn't had its day in court and we should just allow these ideas to be shared again?
Wait, hold on. We already know
these are bad ideas, allow them to be openly derided and mocked for the bullshit that they are.
Yeah, except when it doesn't happen. Except when you have a whole bunch of quote-unquote leftist creators who are then engaging in white supremacist rhetoric. For the memes.
I think they should be absolutely dragged, and no one should ever give them their money again. 100%.
Also, Mad Lad, if you want to point to like if you want to point to like historical examples of like, look at this idea, it led to like this horrible like horrible example A. Why can we discuss this? I mean, I got some other historical events that we could take a look at too that maybe aren't particularly on the right wing of the political aisle.
In defense,
are we in favor of like outlawing that too? I would disagree.
Here's the thing. I mean, in defense of Mad Lad's point. Humanity does these days, especially, well, I think just in general, regardless of the era, have a short memory and tends to repeat bad behavior, like problematic behavior. And this is something that, like, 30 years ago, you couldn't imagine a wave of people, just a large segment of society denying the Holocaust. And like the people who denied the Holocaust were very specific people that we all knew about, and they were a laughing stock, right? And they were seen as being just crazy conspiracy theorists or just blatant anti-Semites
in the West.
And
yeah,
but well, and in Europe especially, but like, but even here in the U.S. And so it's nowadays, it's like now that's actually a possibility. There's people debating it, and it's it's actually taken on some popularity. So that is, I think Matt Ladden's got a little bit of a point here, that there is a short memory, or I'm posing this as a defense of what Matt Ladden is saying, that there is a short memory. And as a generation that had the more direct experience, and their offspring who had the more direct experience with a particular type of negative or harmful behavior or atrocity dies off, the generations that are further distanced from it tend to forget, and then it becomes more like a almost like a mystical kind of thing that it either needs to be debated or is possibly even a cool thing, right? And so that's something to keep in mind. And I'm going to pose that as a defense to what Matt.
And I mean, like, I'm not saying, and I'm not going to suggest
this real quick. Let me address this real quick, if you wouldn't mind. Like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure rhymes, right? Like, that's been said. It doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Like, there's a lot that happens. Now, I think that this short-term memory idea is a good one. Right? Because it shows why we need to continuously push back. We cannot just assume because we defeated it before that it will be defeated it again. We need to have this. We need to know who is saying these things. We need to see them. And then, as Eucharist keeps saying, we need to mock and deride them publicly. We need to have that open in the air. If we suppress these ideas, it feeds into the oppressor narrative.
They're not being derided.
Do you think
they're not being derided enough? Like, that's what the point is. It's getting more and more popular. You can't count on the people to do this thing.
Hang on. All right, so
peasants
the
can't decide it.
world that you think exists is if we just if Twitter was just more rigorous, if Facebook was just more rigorous, these ideas would no longer be popular.
No, they're still going to be popular. It's still going to happen. Like, don't mistake me. Like, my point.
I'm not convinced by your argument that it would be different than it is if we had the things that you're advocating for.
My point. I mean, what have I advocated for besides like just saying that's stupid to have like more deregulation in terms of like free speech here? My point here is not that we can save the world from future fascism. We can't. It's inevitable. There will be a time where the United States of America becomes a fascist state. That is a thing that is going to happen. And like the only thing we can do is slow the process down. That's it. And all I'm advocating for.
Okay, can we go back to Twitter? I have something I want to say about Twitter.
Because as Zoni was saying, like people are forgetful. It's just straight up. Like, there's going to be a time where people are going to allow for, like, right now in Russia, for example, you've got people saying, "Hey, my sons and daughters fighting against fascism," while they're literally conducting fascist acts in Ukraine, right? Like, that's literally happening right now.
I don't understand how that argument applies to America. And
will we go back to this?
We are inevitably going to become a fascist country. Is that what you said? That we are inevitably going
It's inevitable. Like, as time goes on, that is our future. Yes. That's
why do There's
no reason why I can't.
What evidence do you have of this?
Because like
if we dive into this here, it's going to be such a problem.
I mean, like, are you saying that it's like America is like somehow immune from like the same downfalls as anywhere else?
No, hold on. Hold on. There's a difference between saying like you're saying this is impossible. No, you said it's inevitable. You're saying it's going to happen.
Like over time. Like, so give it like hundreds of I'm talking like hundreds of years. Like eventually there's going to be a moment, right? And we're working our way towards the.
This is
like look at what happened in 2021, January 6th. So
Well,
you're telling me
will
that
we go
we're
back
moving
to
in this direction
feudalism?
right now?
Will we just go back to having a king?
No, I mean, like, seriously, we're literally going in that direction right now.
Why don't we
like,
go back to
seriously.
being
Right, no,
cavemen?
don't cut me off. If you actually, no, I'm sorry. Don't cut me off.
Hey,
If you actually want to hear.
Both of you guys, bring down the volume, please.
We have been getting more and more authoritarian schemes from the right wing over the last several years, accumulating into what January 6th was, which was a direct attack on our electoral process. And that's not stopping there. It's going to happen in our future election cycles. That was just a warm-up. So in 2022 and in 2024, you are going to see further attacks on our electoral process. We are definitely going in the fascist direction as we speak, and lots of people already have their blinders up for it. And if you're telling me that this is an impossible thing, I'm sorry. If you're telling me that it's not inevitable, then I don't believe you, because I am literally seeing this process play out, and I'm seeing very few of the quote-unquote defenders against tyranny actually stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, no, maybe this is a problem. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of the people who want to protect the country against tyranny choosing to embrace the tyranny instead, because what they perceive as tyranny is different from everyone else.
Okay, let me respond to this very clearly. I am not saying that this is impossible. The danger signs you point out there are there. They are danger signs. But to act as if because we are trending in the current direction that we will always trend forever and ever in perpetuity towards that direction with no ability to change course is asinine. It is silly.
Okay.
I
would love to see how we're changing course.
Let me finish before you get in. We have these signs in place, and if we don't act on it, sure, there's a likelihood that we might in the future, possibly. But do not act like that is an inevitability, that we have no say in this matter, that we have no ability or choice to change our fate. Because I push back against this liberalism very, very hard. We do have people who are pointing out these danger signs, who are working against fascism in the United States, and it's a fight, right?
And you want to make their job harder.
It's one we can win. Do you not think we can win? Do you think it's inevitable?
I mean, no, I like this direct instance of it. I think there is a chance that like by 2040, the danger is past, right? And then it's gonna be like, the next wave, and then the next wave over time. Like, this is not like, once fascism is like resisted in the United States at one point in history, will it be forever resisted? There's a continuing erosion of our democratic processes that we're currently having to deal with right now. Lots of precedents being set by a variety of presidents. For example, Barack Obama drone struck an American citizen because that American citizen was a terrorist, right? That was a big step in the fascist direction.
Whoa,
and then we have the following president,
and then we have
the following president afterwards declaring masses of Americans terrorists. Antifa, they're all terrorists, right? Okay, it's only a few. I'm just saying, like, there's only a few logical leaps past that before drone striking American citizens for societal stability happens, and people will bat an eye at it.
I would say the drone striking of an American civilian steps into a very dangerous territory of authoritarianism, not necessarily fascism. I would say the mass flagging of groups of people from specific regions who tend to be certain religious and ethnic groups is definitely leaning more toward fascism. But there's sort of like, I feel like maybe what you're trying to say is that we're moving in an authoritarian direction inevitably. And
I will accept that
there are a lot of fascist elements also with other conservatives that take power, but it's, I don't know.
Right.
Is it, you getting?
Can I jump in?
Yeah,
sorry. To pick apart these stupid one-off events is idiotic. 50 years ago, black people didn't have the same rights in America. 10 years ago, gay people didn't have the right to marriage. In another 10 years, trans rights could move 100% forward. This idiotic idea of picking one-off events to fit your narrative is insane.
Thank you.
No, okay, fine. So
yeah, you're saying like it's inevitable because we're on this track. Like in 2008,
the track repeats itself, right?
In 2008,
it's inevitable because it happens over and over again.
Hold on. In 2008, the Democratic candidate for president opposed gay marriage. In 2008, okay. Now the discussion is like trans people in sports. Like that's like the contentious issue. Like to say that we're heading towards.
I'm sorry. What does that have to do with fascism? I'm sorry. What does that have to do with fascism?
Because you said
we're civil rights.
No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Like, gay marriage is not inherently connected to.
Wait, it's a civil right that the state is.
So you have a few additional civil rights that are being doled out, and that's fantastic.
I would say big.
I would not say, but it would not. But those things do not impact policy and how our government runs. Our government has been continuously undermined by one faction or another for decades, since the 1980s. And even if different groups are having more rights, that doesn't actually indicate whatsoever how authoritarian the regime will be in the future. We had ICE agents taking people and imprisoning them without warrant. We have police officers kicking down doors and shooting the occupants in
but none of
So
this
that's
is
definitely authoritarian.
you know
what they did to Fred?
Like, what do you mean that we're
Oh,
having like more freedoms?
Okay,
is what I'm saying,
let's
I
first
guess.
let's kind of like rein in either stick with fascism or authoritarianism. And if you're
Sure.
going to do fascism,
We
describe
can go
to
to
me, like,
authoritarianism then. That's fine.
Yeah,
I'm fine with authoritarianism.
yeah, because
that's an easier
fascism
one to make,
includes
yeah.
so many other things. Like
Hmm.
you know, you got to be reactionary. You got to have a demonized enemy. There are elements of that. Like I would say, a lot of what Trump's policies were initially coming into office had a lot of fascist elements to them. So, but if you're talking about America as a country moving in a direction, you can definitely argue for authoritarian elements becoming more common in many areas, and that's something you could argue for. So I would try to be more specific and not throw fascism around, because then you're going to start getting us trying to pick it apart and be like,
That's fair.
yeah.
I'm willing to go with authoritarian for now.
Even on
'cause-
authoritarianism, the logic doesn't hold. You're pointing out all these things, and I could stipulate to all these things, but that still does not show that we're inevitably, let me pin you on this word here, inevitably moving to one day be fascist in the future. I do not think that is true. I think that we have plenty of people who are opposing this. We do have a lot of institutional things. Like, people look at what's happened recently and the attacks on our institutions, but they don't realize how our institutions have stood strong against those attacks in a majority.
Oh no, but they have actually, because no, they actually have noticed it. In fact, and there's a lot of people who are
I'm not
elections conspiracists getting on the
yet.
no, not just that, they're taking actions. They're literally
They
joining
are, but this
they're
is a
literally
different
infiltrating
thing.
the mechanisms in our country
this is
that
happening.
protected us in
I
2020.
I agree with that, but you're
Okay.
making this leap that because they are trying to do this and doing this right now and trying to do this right
No,
now, that they
my
are
leap
going to
is-
be
I'm sorry.
successful.
My leap, that it's not that makes me say inevitable. The inevitability lies in the fact that there's going to be infinite cases of fascism springing up, and then us eventually failing over time. That's the inevitability part. I'm not saying this specific instance, what happens in the next 20 years is going to lead us to fascism guaranteedly. I'm just saying that is definitely a present danger that we do need to be monitoring. For sure, 1,000%.
I keep being told by fellow leftists that I'm enabling fascism. So maybe it'll be through me that the U.S. becomes
Sonia, our
fascist.
true fascist overlord. Well, I, for one, would be the first to welcome you as our new Lord and Savior. So,
Lady.
Zonia, all hail Zonia, Princess Zonia, hashtag Zonia is my Dami mommy. There we go.
Clip that, guys. Clip it and send it to me.
But again, like, we can understand that there are infinite numbers, like there are infinite possibilities in the future, but infinite possibilities doesn't mean that infinite things are going to happen, right? Like that it has to happen. There are infinite amount of numbers between 2 and 3, but not a single goddamn one of them is 4.
Well,
right?
I mean, fine, but like
not a single goddamn one of them.
our institutions are like slowly being undermined and becoming more authoritarian.
But they
Like
don't
not just the Patriot Act, the drone strikes.
have to be in
But it's
perpetuity.
happening. It's
Yes,
happening,
but it
and we're
doesn't
not doing
have
anything to
to be in
resist it. Instead, we're
perpetuity.
trying to fight for the free speech of folks who want to continue the process,
Free
who
speech,
have a vested interest in continuing to undermine
if you
our
oppress free
institutions.
So the answer is
You
to
are going
use
to
the
undermine-
authoritarian structures to crush their free speech.
Well, no, because we're talking about
True.
in terms of like what we're talking about here. We're talking about Twitter, right? And it's I mean, again, it's very, very open for a
I don't think we're
platform.
talking
Only
about
people
Twitter anymore. We're definitely
Well,
not
right,
talking
well-
about Twitter anymore.
well,
No,
I
we're
mean-
talking about the Patriot Act. We're not talking about Twitter anymore. What are you
Well, I
talking
mean,
about?
no, it's all like there's a intersection between all of the stuff that we're just discussing, right? The whole reason this even came up in the first place, the whole reason I even brought this up was to demonstrate, like, if we're talking about like societal concerns, like those are the societal concerns that I actually have, and I'm not saying that Twitter is going to be the major component in making this happen. There's a lot of other things that are like in the works, but like I was making this point that we should resist these actors in every square that we actually can. right?
And that's why I'm a very opposed to censorship and things like that, because it's my way of pushing it back against
Yeah,
authoritarian
I'm very
fascism,
against government
right?
censorship.
Like,
Absolutely, government censorship is a terrible
censorship
thing.
across the
However,
board.
You like
we're
it when
talking
the company
about
does it.
However, we're talking about these private entities who have their own free speech attached, right? And I'm using the framework of what we have as legal code in the United States to make this argument. I'm not saying that I'm a huge fan of companies having these the equal voices, but like on some level, we are using the fact that they're companies without human faces to justify censoring their speech and their capacity to regulate what's said on their message boards or regulate what they say to their local governor when they pass a law that they have a problem with.
But you understand that legalities aside, the cultural zeitgeist matters. And when the cultural zeitgeist tends towards censorship, it's a problem sign. It's a warning sign. It's a sign that fascism or authoritarianism, let's not use the word
Is
fascism,
inevitable.
authoritarianism is on the rise. That's one of the warning signs,
It
right?
is.
Because it is, again, I will reiterate what I said in my opening statement. Censorship is a tool of oppression, not a protection. Right?
It's both. It's used for both. It's been used for both. It's literally been used for both. You don't see it when you don't actually see it when it's being used in a way that protects a nation from the bad things, because when it happens, it just goes under the radar, right?
One of the reasons we want to keep the shield that is free speech strong, not just legally but culturally, is because it will protect us again when people try to use these institutions that we can point out.
Certainly, guaranteedly protect us in all cases.
Madlad, let me finish, please. When it protects your right to point out, like, hey, gang, this is happening. And I'm calling and ringing the alarm bells like ding, 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 ding. The authoritarianism is coming. Even if you're wrong, it's important that you feel that you are able to point this out, right? And then we can have a discussion. Okay, is it happening? To what extent? Is it inevitable? I don't think it is. I think it's far from inevitable. I think that we have a lot of people that are working against it right now. I am not nearly as doomer-pilled as you are.
We have a lot of people who are working for it too, though. So, like, and we have a lot of people who are completely oblivious to the fact. And that's fine. Like,
and you got avenues through people like me, enabling fascism and authoritarianism.
Well, I mean, have you considered that we're marching towards communism? Have you considered this? This could be true too.
I mean, I don't.
He would like that. He likes that.
All depends on your perspective.
I think it's happening. I think that's where we're going.
I mean,
just based on
do you have on what grounds?
I mean, I can show you. I do have a lot of information if you actually want to have this.
Just show off one event.
Draw you a graph.
One event, and you'll be
spending.
perfectly right, just like Mad Lad is.
I mean, and like, I think that
the stimulus. There you go.
When the stimulus means we're communists. Okay.
I mean, based on your logic,
it was redistribution.
No, it's not the same. It's not the same fucking logic. Like
the same thing as one airstrike 8 years ago.
What? That was an American citizen who was killed without trial. What the fuck are you talking about? That's a legal precedent that was changed. It's not the same thing at all.
It's redistribution of tax dollars, right?
Stolen money.
Now, you can definitely argue it's stolen money, but I wouldn't call that communism.
No, because
communism
it's not
is way
even
more specific.
It's not even stolen money, because like if there weren't taxes, the currency wouldn't function. Like you need to have it's fine.
People will argue the angle that taxation is theft, and there are many arguments.
Let's go back to Twitter if we might. Like,
I mean,
let's
not really, because like the currency is actually created by the goddamn government. Like.
Not necessarily. Not in this government.
Okay, sure, whatever. It's fine. I'll let Spectre make the argument later. I'm sure, like when that man comes back,
Spectre. Yes.
Well, I think we have.
I'll let him
and I think maybe this is like motivating. Maybe like this is what's motivating our disagreement here. Like you believe that America is on this march to the right, and you see like social media and public platforms like as a way to prevent that from happening. And I see it like marching to the left, and the left being the primary antagonizers of this process.
No,
so like
right and left doesn't right and left doesn't actually indicate how authoritarian a system is going to be, though, right? Like,
that's true.
Well, I've got a question for you, Mad Lad, and this actually comes from Rabid Wombat. It said, "Ask Mad Laden, would you have been okay with implementation moderation or implementation of moderation controls during the time of the Trump administration.
As in, like, can we be more specific? Like, what are we
advocating for moderation,
like
moderation of speech on
from?
platforms during the time of the Trump
Well,
administration.
let me be more specific with an example. Like, for example, Biden recently has wanted there's been talk of forming some kind of council that dealt with what is and isn't misinformation and being able to take action against that. Would you have been in favor of Trump holding this thing and putting together?
That's a better way of
Jesus
wording
Christ,
it.
I don't want either of them fucking doing that.
Exactly.
Frankly speaking.
Exactly.
Frankly speaking, I don't
We
think
don't want any of these.
Imagine
people
being
to-
banned for
Anybody
thinking
who's
the
gonna-
election like was accurate. That'd be
Politics is like
hilarious.
politics is like a religion, right? So anybody who's involved in something who has any kind of political position is inevitably, whether they want to or not, this is just a bias kind of thing, they're going to over time try to control or weed out their political opposition or those who disagree with them. So you give someone power to regulate your ability to communicate positions, and you communicate your political positions. People who have control of that regulation, who disagree with your political positions, inevitably over time are probably going to regulate your speech more and more so that you can't voice those political positions that are in opposition to them.
It's usually how it goes, but I would say that the Democratic Party has been like particularly bad at that. Like they had every opportunity to engage in a lot of this sort of thing right after January 6th happened, right? Like they had control of both houses of Congress January 20th.
They had
like
50 seats
broad
in the Senate. Like
they had broad societal
And 6
support
seats
for
in the
how
House.
to-
Wait, what do you think they
they
should have
had
done?
they had broad societal support for. Well, I mean, the thing
For
that's really
what?
funny is that the folks who are being punished for the January 6th attack on the Capitol are the folks who actually went to the Capitol building, but none of the folks who drove the crowd into the Capitol building to begin with. The same people who encouraged this crowd to attack the Capitol are encouraging the masses to do things yet again. Like we're talking about like Michael Flynn, Donald Trump, like just folks of that ilk. They're literally encouraging like acts of, I'm just gonna call them acts because they're not all entirely violent, but it just acts like subversive acts that like directly attacked our institutions, and nothing's being done about them. There's a 2-year investigation by the time this investigation is concluded, and I do support the fact, like I do support the need for an investigation. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that this process is arduous and slow, and the Democratic Party has done very little to like actually leverage the fact that this event has
Do you
happened.
think there is value in being able-
Real quickly, and then I know this is not the subject, so I know we definitely don't have time to get into it. But just for the record, I disagree with his insinuation that Donald Trump incited or like legally incited or caused January 6th. I think that's an absurd proposal. But that's a discussion for another day.
So he called
for
the whole
sure.
rally.
That's
to
a
the
discussion
place.
for another day for sure.
He told
You can take your
everybody to
opinion.
march.
I have a more on topic question before we get down that particular rabbit hole. Because
It's a rabbit
it isn't
hole.
the conversation as it turns out. But when it comes down to it, like, so I guess for Mad Lad, I will ask you 2 questions actually. Do you think that there is a value in being able to be critical of institutions and saying this institution is corrupt and we need to change it or fix it or tear it down? Do you think that should be allowed?
Yes, but
Yes.
only through legal. Like the point is that like you're trying to. I think like the measure of faith that is. I mean, it's like good faith versus bad faith arguments against the corrupt institutions, right? So like if there's folks who are proposing like institutional recourse to solve the problems, that's one thing. If people are suggesting things that are kind of vigilante style and or abuses our institutions to make these changes, I'd have a big problem with that.
So like hosting a riot against the police system and tearing down systems like that, you'd be against that then?
In terms of hosting a riot,
or
I mean,
holding a rioting and physically rising up against cops and protesting police and police violence by rioting
and burning
by-
down a department.
Yeah, by burning down. You'd be
so
against that,
I would
right? Are
say
you coming
that-
out against that right now here on live on PrimeCayes?
So,
Do it right now,
in terms of like what happened with BLM, like I 1000% support the folks who went out. Most of the vandalism that occurred, like the police departments being burned down, the autonomous zones being built out, etc., were done by independent actors that weren't actually trying to like solve the problems that existed. So I'm perfectly happy to sell folks who were undermining the system for their own political purposes. If it gets rid of the folks who are like trying to turn our country into an authoritarian state.
So I think that you mostly agree with the goals of one, so you're able to give more laxity towards them, and you disagree with the goals of the other, so you hold.
I mean, I literally didn't say that at all, but
I mean, but that's what I'm hearing, right? That's the
okay,
implication
so
of your
I guess I'll
statement.
be. I mean, no, because like I said, like
Based
I
on
had problems
your
with.
previous statement, you had problems with people who
I did
use
not
extra legal and non-institutional measures to try to
Right.
protest and change.
And then I
institutions.
cited, and then I literally cited the folks who like burned down X building or Y building, and the folks who built the autonomous zone as like problematic actors, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're bad,
Fair
bad,
enough.
bad people.
Cool.
Good.
Fair enough.
I mean, I
Okay.
didn't say bad
Fair
people
enough.
inherently. I did say they're problematic.
You don't have to
actors.
say, but I you just
Like,
disagree
there's,
with that.
I would say so. I think
Well, I
you
mean,
burned down.
that's
If you burned
fine.
down a police precinct, I think that's probably.
Well, okay.
bad.
The people who, well, I mean, some of the people who did that did so. From what I understand, the folks who did it in Minneapolis specifically were actually right wingers, not left wingers. They were trying to start shit.
Who burned down the Minneapolis Police Department?
Not
I
the
feel
ones
like
who,
it
not
was
the ones who burned it down, but the ones who started out the riots by breaking glass in shops. Yeah, many of those people were traced.
There were a
to-
lot of right wingers. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those were. traced
Yeah,
to
I
right-wingers.
guess
I'm waiting for a lot of the cases
I
to
haven't
resolve.
I haven't
Right.
prepped this right now to like know if that's for sure like true or false. It sounds ridiculous and I don't believe it, but go ahead.
Wait, to ask them to trick them was the majority of rioters leftists or right wingers? That's the best way to get them. Who were the majority of people vandalizing stuff in Minneapolis? Are you going to say majority of were right wingers?
No, they
or
were
left
left-wingers.
wingers.
Well, I mean,
Okay, there you go, Lassett.
Everyone asserts that. They always say
Well,
like, yeah, like January 6th, like a lot of people were saying that's actually Antifa. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
it
Come
wasn't.
on.
And-
Of course it wasn't. In the same
well,
way
like,
that like, the
but you
BLM
can-
riots,
no,
they
it's
were
not
not
the same.
right-wingers.
No, I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. You can actually like look at the
No, it's the
legal.
same thing.
No, you actually look at like the legal cases that have like arose from each respective event, and you can see the types of people. Like there were way more right wing actors at BLM than there were left wing actors in the January 6th riots. In fact, I don't even think there were any left wingers in the January.
So
Okay, be careful
I'm
about
going to
saying
research
that.
that. I'm going to research
Yeah.
that, and I
I mean, I'm literally saying that
that might come in handy a couple weeks from now. Is
I mean, like, no,
your
I
words.
mean, like, my bar is literally like if there's one person at the January 6th riot, then that might like even the score. But I don't think there's any leftists at January 6th, and there's at least one right winger who participated in the BLM riots. Right, like that's all I'm saying here. I'm not
But
saying that it's a
basically,
majority.
there were
Like it's an easy W for me here. Like I
there-
don't think you can
there were
challenge that statement.
there were right-wing agitators that were tracked down for the Minneapolis daytime riots, at least. Like the one dude who was in body armor who was breaking windows, and a number of other incidents that were similar to that kind of initiated. They're called agitators, right? Because they'll initiate things. There's one who had thrown a bottle at a cop. So there are some of those that were actually tracked down. Those who actually went and then got agitated by it and started actually doing vandalism, no, they were on the BLM side and were bad actors, but there were right-wing agitators in those crowds.
I guess I ask these questions to just point out that I think that they're when we talk about like being critical of institutions and things like that, and when we talk about censoring people who are advocating for the overthrow of certain institutions. There's a very real danger that it's going to protect actually corrupt institutions. If the government has some corruption in it, we need the freedom, the ability to express, even if we're wrong, that, hey, there is corruption there. We need that to have that conversation. We cannot have one side being able to say, no, you're just a conspiracy theorist and shut you down. And that's what it turns into. When it comes down to who's making these moderation decisions, they're going to decide what is misinformation or disinformation and what is not. And it sets a dangerous, dangerous precedent. Because again, we want that freedom, that ability to express on a large platform that I think this is X, Y, or Z. And instead of being just censored and disappeared, quote unquote, or our tweet or quote or whatever, or post taken down, it should be discussed. And if we're wrong, we should be able to be denigrated in the public square. And the public square is to take us through the ringer of all the reasons why what we just said was bullshit. That's the future I want. That's the ideal I have. I know it's not perfect in America here. I know it's not perfect in our institutions here, but I protect this because it will prevent the authoritarianism that you feel so concerned about, and I feel concerned about too. We want these strong cultural norms regarding free speech to remain strong so that we can oppose authoritarianism in all its forms.
No, if you actually want to oppose authoritarianism in all of its forms, I think that it is important to have the capacity to engage in free speech. Absolutely fine. I guess I would also say, like, going back to like the initial, like the place where we started off here, I'm very skeptical that Elon Musk is going to somehow make Twitter a freer space than it already is.
I mean,
The amount of doubt's
again,
always
his
good.
stated
Wait.
goals. His stated
goals
seem
are great.
fine. Yeah, seem fine.
Fantastic.
Can I ask Matt a question? So if Elon Musk made Twitter 10% more freer, is that more, guaranteed to mean more harm?
If Elon Musk made Twitter 10% more freer, then my skepticism would be, would be met with an L, right? Like, then, okay, he managed to make Twitter a freer space. I have my doubts that that's going to happen in the first place. I guess, like, will it cause harm? I mean, I guess it just depends on how many white supremacists like come out of the woodwork and start engaging in like the eventual suppression of speech by having their speech like go unfiltered, right? Like, how many creators, how many people saw the N-word stuff on Twitter and proceeded to no longer engage with individuals who thought it was okay, like privately, right?
I'm
Like,
still engaging with them, but I am not happy about it.
No,
I'm trying to think about how to approach it.
And like the thing is, like, there isn't a very easy solution to it. Like, there is no solution. Like, this shouldn't have happened in the first place, and the fact that it did happen is unfortunate. And there's gonna be a lot of people who see things like that and say, okay, this space is not for me. And yeah, I think voluntarily step out of the space, fine. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get this discourse that all of a sudden stops racism. Everybody's going to be told to get thick skin and everything's going to be fine, and that's it.
You guys fight.
I think we just got to be very. I think we just got to be very careful. Like,
yeah,
I would agree. Seeing 1,000 N-word or racist tweets a day would be awful. But if I saw one racist tweet a day, I don't think that's awful. And I think you then have the opportunity to tweet at that person, quote tweet them, and call them a retard or stupid. I don't know what Prime's rules about that R word, but you can call these people out if there's like a right amount of them. 1,000 racist tweets you can't attack, but one or two you can definitely go out and attack those and have a debate.
So we have a
I think Aladdin is saying.
I have a solution. I have an interesting solution. What if Elon Musk, his solution to this was like there's like a function on Twitter which is like ad block, but it's like slur block, and like if you turn it on, like it like gets rid of all the slurs, and then you don't, and if you don't want to see them, you don't have to.
The problem is that these are the slur chains or slur towers where they post one N and then somebody posts an I and etc.
He's the king of AI. He can figure it out.
It's not that easy to take care of, but I'm gonna propose this. I'm gonna kind of like bring in a concept and see what Matt Ladden says. So I know for me, I was very, very disappointed by the N-word towers that were being done by people on the left, because at least from my perspective, like, it's very disappointing when you're used to having sort of like a continuous negative pressure from like an opposing political position, like people who politically oppose you and are on the other side of the political aisle, so to speak, like that's one thing, and you're constantly dealing with that fight. It's always there. It's ever present. You're always aware of it, and so it becomes part of the norm. But you kind of feel like you've got a bit of like you got people who have got your back on your side who wouldn't do those things. But then when those people go and meme on it, even though they don't technically hold the views of the toxic views behind that language, they're still going and effectively using those same racist or bigoted terms. It kind of it almost makes you feel like, well, what have I got then? They're just kind of like another pathway to attacking me. And
Yeah.
and it's disappointing and it's degrading and it's kind of lowering the bar for our own position and our own what we're fighting for, right? That's the way I would see it anyway. So I don't know, what's your position on that, Mad Lad?
I mean, it's like it's hard to say anything distinctive from what you just expressed, right? Like that's exactly what's going on. And like I think I would say like I think the first time it happened it was a surprise. So like I think that like there's some actors who are involved in the situation who I'm not going to like hold as accountable, and like, you know, no sweat, mistakes happen, etc., etc. But there's like others who are going in with this intent of like kind of using this terminology in a way that like they're bullying others by using this terminology, like point blank, right? Like if their intent is to bully and they're supposedly on our side, or I mean just existing in the space in the first place, like it's just makes it very, very hard to get involved in any sort of discourse. And then they, you know, they double down on the meme, right? They say, oh, it's a meme, I'm not taking it seriously. And then they, you know, they're gathering their supporters to back them up, because like they've kind of put themselves in a position where like, you know, it's me or this person I victimized, right? Like there's no middle ground here. Like either I'm the bad guy or they're not getting the joke, and that makes them the bad guy. And they're like, you know, gathering their forces and, you know, kind of doubling down and tripling down, and then getting their followers to like back them up, which like, you know, it just is additional bullying and creating an additional rift and causing additional problems. The brigading, if you will. So yeah, the whole thing is fucking shit. And there's no good solution for it either. Like I don't see a way that we can like actually kind of repair this crack that exists, unless like everybody kind of gathers around and says, hey, this actor and this actor shouldn't be participating in the space anymore. And then like, you know, if other people like, you know, demonstrate like actual what's the word, regret for their participation, I think that would be helpful too. I don't know. It's a very difficult. I think it's a very difficult discussion to have, and like I don't even think censorship would have like fixed this anyway, right?
Okay,
Like
that
this
would
was
be
like
my question, Mad Lad. Do you think that some form of censorship would have, well, I guess I'll ask you directly. Do you think that they should be deplatformed for it?
He already said it. He said Counsel should be deplatformed. Well, no, not bringing up names, but he did say that.
Fuck that asshole. I mean, oh shit, I didn't even bring up his name again. Oh
okay,
God!
He did already say that people should be the platform for doing.
Okay, well, if that's your stance, I disagree. I hard disagree. Right?
Like, I gotta know what Counsel did.
I mean,
he said the word.
Three, like, just make a like. There's a list. Like when has Counsel not done at this point?
Like I support you. If you don't want to watch him anymore,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I brought up Counssel's name
like,
in this,
whatever.
But he did state in the very beginning that there are some people who should lose their platform because of this behavior and other behaviors.
That was a while ago in the conversation. So I guess for me, like I don't know the specifics of this particular situation, but I just hard disagree with the like that people should deplatform for this kind of behavior. Advocate against.
We talked about this, right? Like deplatform plus, right?
Let me finish. Advocate against it. Say, hey, all my buddies, we shouldn't watch this anymore, right? Like I point out what he did, point out why you think it was wrong, point out why you think people shouldn't watch it anymore. But to deplatform someone is to force their decision. So instead of just laying out all the facts and allowing the viewer to decide one way or another, what you're doing is that you're saying, I think these are all things that are true, and because I think these things are true,
I mean,
I'm not going to allow
the evidence
anyone
is
to watch
like in
this
the public
thing.
record. Like, just look at his fucking tweets. And like the point here is that like
I don't follow the guy, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, just go ahead. Like, you just go ahead, spend like an hour researching all the fucked up shit he's done. Whatever.
Yeah, I got.
And like, the whole point here though is that like the deplatforming, it shouldn't be like a standalone thing, right? Like okay, wait, hold on. I'm sorry, hold on. Before I even get to it not being standalone, your reasoning was that it's a unilateral decision from above rather than the people deciding to like slowly not watch them. Is that your point? Because what happens in the space. What happens in the space is that there's like 100 to 300 to 400 people that like kind of go around and hang out with all the edgy creators and kind of go on a cycle, right? And like, even if all the reasonable folk who look at the situation and think, oh yeah, he's really doing some fucked up shit, and they leave, there's still gonna be people who are interested in the drama that this person starts, and they're more invested in the memes and all this like bullying shit for entertainment, right? So like you can't get people to deplatform folks like this, especially if they are entertaining. That's the biggest problem. So you do need something that's unilateral. But the real problem is when someone does get unilaterally removed or even canceled or whatever, like, how do you tend to this person? Because we don't want to lose this person as an actor. Maybe they'll come back as a good guy one day. And when I'm talking about deplatforming plus, I think that there should be a select, like, I mean, people who are close
Like
to the individual.
Yeah, we can put them in, right? Like,
and I know. I mean, like, there should just be like,
re-educate them, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, not at all.
Sensitivity camp.
Like, that's ridiculous.
It's coming. You guys think it's not coming? It's inevitable. It's coming.
This is
I mean,
a problem, Mad
no,
Lad.
I mean, like, you need to have a place for these people to go to, a program that they can work through to get them back on the road, so to speak.
Memes aside.
No, it's like if you get your driver's license revoked, you should go to fucking driving class before you're allowed on the road because you were dangerous before you had your license revoked, and then you have to go through the training again so that you're not dangerous on the fucking road. It should be the same thing with people abusing that right that they have to free speech. When someone yells a fire in a theater, you're not protecting that fucking free speech, are you? No.
What do you mean?
Absolutely
do you think
not.
It's illegal to yell fire in the theater?
You have the freedom to say it. There will be consequences.
Well, no, actually, there's like some legalese against it. I do believe. I'm pretty sure that there's actual like legal.
Well,
stuff
what happens is the people who get hurt as a result of it, you end up. And
there's
in the fees.
We have a
like,
lawyer
cost
here.
to
We
the-
could ask him.
Cost cost of the building and the business, stuff like that. Those are the things.
Well, actually, I actually do want to ask Lactoid. Like, there is like criminal charges that can be done for yelling fire,
reason,
right?
For yelling fire in a crowded theater.
The reason why people are allowed to say it and yell fire is because if there's a fire, you have to be able to say it. What you pay for afterward are the consequences for having not had a fire and what that harm that did to the business and to the people within the business.
Right. So crying wolf.
I can explain, right? So like, I feel like fire in a crowded theater is the ultimate example that people bring up when they're arguing against freedom of speech. I think that it's a poor example though, because if somebody, even if they're mistaken, if somebody genuinely believes there to be a fire in a crowded theater, I think we should forgive them and almost, not even punish them, like maybe even reward them for yelling fire in a crowded theater if they have reason to believe that there is a fire in a crowded theater. Now, if they're doing it with specific malicious intent of like, I want to get people hurt and I know there's not a fire, well then, yeah, that's a different question, right? I mean, I could very well see charges coming out of that if somebody got killed or something along those lines. But if somebody, even if they're mistaken, if somebody genuinely believes there to be a fire, like, we can't punish this person.
Yeah.
I don't think beliefs are chosen, right? When people come to beliefs, it is sort of a detached experience from your direct action. And so,
but the investigation would be on whether you believe the fire was there or not, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. The question that would be the question, right? Because we don't want to punish.
And this is assuming harm is done. Because if there have been many incidents where people have thought that there was a fire, called out the fact that they thought that there was a fire, people vacate the building, no fire, nobody got hurt, no damage to the business or anything, no harm, no foul. no charges, right? So it all depends on what the result is, what the outcome of the situation is.
Well, I mean,
and
the
then
whole point
that's
of
where the
this.
charges come from. So you
The-
you have the
Well, I
freedom
mean, this was
to
discussed on the
sell-
Supreme
yell
Court
fire.
level.
You have
Yes,
the
and it was
freedom- yes.
overturned later on.
Yeah.
Partially overturned.
was.
Partially overturned. Okay, but the larger point here is this: like the difference between you and I, Matt Ladd, is agency, and I want to put agency in the hands of the viewers, whereas you seem to want to take it away from the hands of the viewers, and whereas you want some
If
authority.
the viewers aren't,
just
if
let
the
me
view-
finish. Let me goddamn finish. So where you want some sort of authority or counsel or whatever situation you want in, telling people what they can and cannot say or watch or do, I would rather leave that in the hands of the agency of the people to choose what content that they consume and what content that they put out
To
there.
what extent? So let's say the
Down
people.
to it, I want to ask you this, Mad Lad. Which person here do you want deciding what you can and cannot say?
I mean, let's pause
I'll do
actually. No, I mean, before we even get to that part, like, to what extent should we rely on people to make these decisions? So let's say we're going down that authoritarian line. Let's say we're going down that fascist line, and it's like to grand applause, like what's happening in Russia. Like, I think it's like a 50-50 split as far as like folks who think this war in Ukraine is like, legit fighting fascists, and folks who realize that Putin is himself like kind of an authoritarian ruler, right? So like, to what extent can we trust the crowds there? Or can Russians trust their fellow countrymen to make the right decision? Like, at a certain point, like, there needs to be like some sort of like authority that exists to say, hey, this is actually what's going on, right? And like, unfortunately, in Russia, the only authorities are the authority of the fascists that's in charge. So like, I guess like my point is, before we get to the point where there are actually just a system that is like kind of before we get to the point of no institutional recourse, right? Do we allow things to kind of proceed and trust the crowds to actually manage all this?
The point where we have an institution that can tell people what they can and cannot say, we need to make an institution to tell people what they can and cannot say, so we can avoid doing that in the future. That's silly. That's silly.
Well,
it's the perfect solution.
But I mean, it's the types of.
Let's do it to ourselves first.
Well, no, I mean, it's. Well, like, the thing is, it's two separate things, right? Like, we're talking about, like we spent a long time, with rules that kind of like governed our discourse up until like 1987, like before Reagan, like, removed those like air rules. Like, you can have regulations that are like, soft-handed and gentle, and then you can have like the police state where people are getting arrested for like voicing their opinions. Like, not all institutional things implemented by an institution are equal or the same.
Madeline, I want to point
but
out,
we
like,
talked
in
about
Russia,
how it moves in that direction over time. The things become.
It does.
Things don't tend to loosen up and become more free over time. Not usually, unless there's a revolution, like what we did, more than 200 years ago. But what we do have is we have, inevitably things tighten up over time and become more restrictive. So that's why you kind of have to have the continuous fight to prevent the levers of restriction, the levers of censorship, the levers of oppression. You need to regularly have that fight and push back against these things, which is why the majority of us are pushing back against you on this.
And I mean, that's fine. I'm not like how do I put it? Maybe like I just need to like figure out a better way of articulating it or something. Like, I'm not saying that. I mean, I keep being put in this position where I'm forced to argue that on some level regulation of speech is good, right? Like, that keeps having to happen. But like, really what I'm here to do today isn't to argue that regulation of speech is good, but more so to say that we don't need to deregulate speech any more than we already have, especially on Twitter, because it's already like a pretty free platform as is, right? Like, that's like the only thing I've been like trying to do.
Sure, but do you think that
would
the
you be
cultural zeitgeist is moving more towards censorship or away from censorship in general?
I would say that it's going
keep in mind we're on
towards
Twitch.
censorship.
Very much so. Like I've been.
I'm trying to think like examples of where it's not, and like I think every faction in this country is very much going in the direction of censorship. Even the
Because
folks who
laws often
even those who like
follow
present, even though like folks who
cultural
like
movements. Cultural movements usually precede changes in laws and regulations and things like that. So one of the reasons I advocate strongly against this movement towards more censoriousness in the public is because I understand that these cultural movements, this cultural zeitgeist, will not inevitably, but has a very good possibility of leading towards more censorious regulations that are actually laws. And I want to oppose that. I want to nip in the bud. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so I want to try to push back against it as hard as I can now so that I don't have to break the law later by pushing back against it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
so I can see
definitely
that,
agree
but
with that
like,
position.
yeah, so like I can agree with that position. As we get like closer to actual like censorship, but like I don't see us in a position where we're like actually dealing with real authoritarian like government censorship here. Like this is literally Twitter, private institution that has barely done any like censorship whatsoever, engaged in any sort of censorship. It just banned people who said some really fucked up shit. And Elon Musk wants to buy it to allow people to say more fucked up shit while also saying fucked up shit like continuously. Like you're not nipping anything in the bud by like saying, hey, we need to deregulate Twitter further. Like that's my point. Like you can literally have it be slightly like once we get to Twitch levels, like yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely. But like we're not at Twitch levels.
We'll get to that point, and then we won't be able to fight it very effectively.
Twitch used to not be at Twitch levels. They used to be at Twitter levels.
Yeah. So,
Twitter
and now I would agree with anyone who says that Twitch is a bit too regulated from the top down.
And
absolutely.
how's our pushback against it going for us?
I mean, not particularly well.
All Twitter wants to do is
Elon Musk could do it.
It just wants to put in the tip of censorship, Mad Lad. Just the tip. It's not going to go any further, right? Just the tip of it.
This is literally like we're trying to find like like what the perfect balance is between censorship and not censorship. Not saying, oh hey, if it goes one way, it's going to be like this inevitable slide.
Like I said, over time it becomes more restrictive.
I mean,
we already agreed that over time they become more and more restrictive, right? So we're at that point on Twitch where we've gotten to the point where it's stiflingly restrictive for conversations, and yet we can't do anything about it, right?
Well, and now
so
we got to see what happens, right? Well, and then there's going to be decisions that are going to be made as a result. It might change Twitch's TOS, right? And like at some point, and I mean at some point, like there will be changes. I'm not saying that I'm advocating for like where Twitch is right now. I'm just saying I've got this is like an arbitrary line.
I've got friends who are literally ramping up on YouTube so that they can eventually vacate Twitch and just dedicate their stream to YouTube. Like Stardust is doing that, for instance, right? Yeah. And I know multiple streamers who are doing this. So will that force them? I don't know. There's going to be a constant influx.
Now the question is so Twitch has gotten to a point where it's, and I would say like both before Twitch got to where it is, like my line is like somewhere below where it is right now. Okay. Like Twitch is just like the most concrete example we can actually discuss. Where I'm like, yeah, this is too much censorship. There's like some serious problems here. Like the judgments on who gets banned and who doesn't get banned is arbitrary. The negotiations for how streamers are paid is kind of arbitrary as well. There's a lot of other things going on here, right? But like this is not like a line that I'm comfortable with. This is just like in a red zone where I'm not happy and not comfortable. And I wouldn't even call this like a complete disaster. This is just like a place where I'm not happy. And like my point here is that what's happening is that all the streamers that are interested in like discourse are leaving the platform altogether. And when that happens, it's going to impact Twitch's ability to make money. And if it's impacting Twitch's ability to make money, they will have to make some changes as a result, right?
We're kind of a minority population. I mean, we're definitely a minority population.
Oh, fair enough. So maybe that's the thing. But no, because hot tub streamers are encountering the same types of problems. There are video game streamers who are encountering the same types of problems. There's a lot of people who are just getting banned outright without being informed as to why.
The video game streamers, not so much. Look at the minor number of them, a fraction of them who are being affected by this. But and that's where the bulk of their money is. Well, besides the sexy streamers.
Well, I mean, the sexy streamers are having this problem over and over again. So, like, I mean,
we're talking about Twitch and Twitter.
Streamer, I too have.
We're talking about Twitch and Twitter. What do you think
sexy streamer?
What do you think about Facebook's moderation? What do you think about Facebook's moderation? Mad Lad.
I'm trying
Facebook,
to think. I haven't been on.
isn't
I've
it like
avoided the
only-
platform in forever.
Yeah, isn't it like only boomers there?
Hey,
I mean, I have a Facebook, but like I don't use
Zonia
it for.
throwing shots. Wow. just
Wow.
Like
killing
the
it.
last time I argued politics on Facebook was like 2015, probably.
Well, we know who our new overlord is going to oppress first, Lactoid. Just
so
be
I
careful.
know, yeah, it's coming. So this is super anecdotal, but like I got a notification just recently on my Facebook, which I do use, and it was like one of your posts has been flagged for moderation and has been taken down, and I was like, okay, which one? And I looked into it, and it was a meme I had shared 4 years ago, and it was like a fairy tale cover book of like Hitler, and it was like everyone who disagrees with me is Hitler, a child's fantasy or a child's fairy tale or something. And then the point of the meme was to like make fun of people who call Hitler like anything they don't like, that's fascist, that's Hitler,
literally
right?
Hitler.
Yeah.
blah, blah, yeah.
But like because it had like the face, that was enough to trigger the algorithm.
Get fucked.
Yeah,
it's bullshit.
There's a lot of stuff like that. Like I've had things, not Facebook because I don't use Facebook, because not a boomer. But I've had things that were moderated because I use like a term or a depiction as an example to cast judgment upon a negative or harmful thing. So it's a positive thing using a negative event to cast judgment on a negative or harmful behavior, and that gets moderated. And I don't even know if it has. I don't think it has to do with like automated moderation. I think it has to do with being reported by people who didn't like being criticized or judged by what I was doing. But they kind of see the negative thing in there, and they're like, oh yeah, whatever it is, right? I think like the best example I could come up with was a Nazi example that I had used, and they're like, oh, it's got a depiction of somebody who's like a goose walking fascist or something. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm actually using that to cast judgment on that kind of negative behavior. We can't even talk about it now. Next thing you know, you can't talk about actual harmful past events like the Holocaust, right? Because that'll get censored, and you're unable to talk about specific things that would be disparaging and deriding harmful behavior, right?
Yeah, and you're relying on moderators to be able to understand the point you're making before they moderate you, and that's like.
I think maybe this will actually help us like build a bridge here. I think I understand. I think this might help. As far as I'm concerned, bad moderation or bad regulation is the same as no regulation and no moderation. I think they both are very harmful. I think if you have good regulation and good moderation, that can be very beneficial.
Define good.
Yeah, I hard disagree. I would say that no moderation is better than bad moderation. Bad moderation is significantly worse.
I'm just going to say it. I miss the Wild West days of the internet. That's where I came from. Usenet, IRC. That's my era.
So
90s internet.
Some of them are pretty crazy though.
So no moderation means just letting Nazis say whatever the fuck they want. Bad moderation
means better than the Nazis.
Everybody believes in
bad moderation. Right. So, but bad moderation means that like you ban the Nazis and then accidentally ban other folks.
No. Bad moderation is those Nazis banning you when you criticize them. That's bad moderation.
I mean, that's a form of bad moderation.
Yes, which is significantly worse. I think you would agree that that's significantly worse.
Well, no moderation.
So
I can cook up a hypothetical with no moderation that would be just as bad, right?
Dude,
ideological moderation. Make sure that's an important qualifier here because everyone here agrees with non-ideological moderation to some extent. Okay.
Right.
Like we could just use a real world example. It was one of the things that I had to deal with was getting bombarded and mass reported by groypers when I was calling them out for their anti-Semitic shit. So and that was on Twitter, and got bombarded by them on YouTube as well. But yeah, it's that's bad moderation. The mechanism is there, and it gets weaponized by those who have an ideological disagreement with you.
So yeah, and I agree, and like my point is we can probably figure out where we agree on what good moderation is, right? Like there's got to be something that we can say, hey, these are things that we don't want on a platform. And the question is, are these things already banned on Twitter? And then the question then becomes like, are there any things that we would like to see more of on Twitter that Elon Musk is going to bring back to Twitter, right? So like, what's banned on Twitter right now?
This is too
Trump.
presentist, right? Like, because we can imagine a situation where Twitter does update its guidelines or does in the future moderate things that we would agree that should not be moderated. And like when it comes to ideological moderation, my stance is firmly no ideological moderation. Boom.
No ideological moderation. Okay. So there are
Because if
people,
you
the rich
involved,
people
then
get to be there
ideological
too.
Moderation will bleed.
So-
Ideology will bleed into it so long as there's a human involved, no matter what.
fair
That might
enough.
be
So
true,
like,
yeah.
I guess like the question is like, what ideological moderation does Twitter engage with? Because like I see people who are like extremely anti-vax.
There
I
are
see
calls
people-
for banning disinformation and things like that, banning misinformation on
Okay.
Twitter, where it might not do
But
it
does Twitter
currently.
do
There are
it?
people who are
They do that in
advocating right
Russia.
now for that, right?
Okay, so Elon Musk is going to stop those people from advocating for it. My question is, what does Twitter do that is actually a problem that Elon Musk is going to fix? Like literally, that's my question.
I think they ban too much. I think it's that simple.
Too much what?
I have people
Overall.
who have been banned for COVID misinformation when they were actually putting out correct information about it, trying to encourage people to get vaccinated and such.
Or for just
Okay.
being edgy.
Yeah, I mean, they banned Destiny, right? For some of us
Yeah.
from DGG,
And
right? They
does
they
anyone know
banned
the
Trump,
reason?
right?
And Destiny has gone through so many accounts.
Wait. Does anyone know the original reason why his original verified Twitter account was banned?
I think
I
it was
don't.
Rittenhouse, if I'm
I
not
for-
mistaken.
No, it predates it
No?
by a
It would
year or
predate it?
two.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
2 years. His first ban was
His
like
Twitch was from
2017 or
But
2018.
like
while
people seem
back.
to like shit on his like Twitter activity and they don't know the reason he's banned. I think it's pretty funny.
I don't remember the original
Nobody
reason
Look at
anymore.
me right now.
No one knows. No one knows,
Yeah.
but they have a lot of shit to say.
Nobody's
Hey,
talking about
I-
Destiny's Twitter.
Yeah,
the
don't give a
important
shit.
people know. The important people know. That's all that matters.
Well, when it comes,
They
down
know
to
I
it,
got
like,
banned.
I don't.
By the way,
honestly
bring
don't care
Destiny
about
and Vosh
Destiny's
back to
Twitter
Twitch,
ban.
please.
I just
Holy
don't.
fucking shit.
Vosh
But,
is
but when
back.
it comes down to what is like, look, we advocate like if Elon, if his stated goals is to have a less heavy-handed moderation, I'm for that. Right? Like if he actually succeeds in it, I'm for that because it will prevent people from being successful in their advocacy. I think they should be still able to advocate for it, but I don't
But you
think
don't
they
even
should be
know how
successful in
good
their
or bad
advocacy.
Twitter's system is. Like you don't have anything concrete that you point to that said, "Hey, this is a bad Twitter ban."
Zonia mentioned sometimes she was.
Yeah, I'm
banned
asking about
from
you.
it.
You've got okay, so like specifically what you like. I'm
I'm
specifically
pointing
asking
to
you.
specific things that are being advocated for right now. I can't.
Sure.
I'm not familiar enough with Twitter, like the ins and outs of his moderation system. And one of the reasons I'm not is because it's not transparent. Right? It's very untransparent. Like just like Twitch moderation.
You know
very
who's
not
been banned and
transparent.
who's not been banned, and I guess like my question is:
Sure,
did you
can know
formulate?
who,
Did you
but
decide on this
why?
hill before you knew how thorough Twitter's bans are?
Wait,
the first
you
place?
are holding me to a pretty impossible standard that I have to know exactly why every.
No, I
single
mean,
person is
not every single one. I just wanted to know, like,
Sure.
if there's which Twitter
Anyone
bans
who's
did you have a
banned, as
problem with?
Zonia mentioned, anyone who's banned for putting
Before
out
this panel,
misinformation.
you had this opinion, and my question
Yes,
for you
because I know
is
people who've been banned for bullshit reasons.
okay.
True. Very true.
I will.
Everybody knows somebody that was banned for a bullshit reason.
Hey. I mean, we've gone past the allotted time. This is a super interesting discussion. Thank you, everyone. For this has been really, really fun. Thank you. I'm really glad that we got this group together. So we're going to my audience. You can't see me, but that's okay. I'm not that important. If you've been enjoying this content, hit the follow button. If you haven't done so yet, if you've been here watching these people, fight the good fight against each other, right? Hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. We do this all the time, 7 nights a week, right? Either here on YouTube. Yeah, thank you, Gnosis, for putting our social media in chat. We got Twitter, where we tweet about these things, Discord, the center of this community, and where we're going to be doing our open walk on panel right after this, and YouTube. In case you missed anything, check out our YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Yes, and yes, the content does not end, right? We still will have more content for you. We're not done yet. So we're gonna have another panel where it's a walk-on panel. You can come on, have a conversation, respond to what people said here, or we talk about something new, whatever you want. Okay. But first, I'm gonna give an outro. Well, thank you, Finger. Oh wow! First, I'm gonna thank Finger.
Nice.
Thank you, Finger, for the 10 hot tier 1 gift subs to the channel. Thank you, Finger. That really is a big
Thank
help.
you. Hey, let's see if we can get a hype train, guys. Let's reward Prime for this stuff that he puts on 7 nights a week, working his butt off for us, dealing with people like Mad Laden screaming on the mic, and having to deal with his hearing his audible eye rolling when the conversation wasn't going so well. We all heard that. We heard that eye roll, that exasperation in his voice. That was very palpable. Let's get some bits in here. Let's get some subs in here, and let's see if we can give Prime back something for putting up with all of us and our asshole-ish attitudes and our getting at each other's throats.
Prime stands free speech. Prime stands free speech by allowing people to come on and advocate for all sorts of positions. And given the level, the temperature of the chat room, that as I saw, you guys stand free speech too. Show Prime how much you care by giving him subs, by giving him bits, by giving him supports and follows. Look, do you want to see more of this sexy beard? Show him that you like when I'm on. Then you like having Zonia on. That you like having even someone like Mad Lad on.
I'm sending you to a camp.
Show
Okay, I'm done. That's it. I am fucking authoritarian pilled. I'm done. That's it. I'm gonna start. Start a thing, but also give Prime your subs and bits.
And we got a hype train now, by the way.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that on stream? I meant in Minecraft. I'm gonna send you to camp in Minecraft.
You're summer camp, right? There's nothing wrong. What do you mean?
I'm gonna teach you some chess.
You let me say a lot. I really appreciate it. You let me say a lot in your a lot. So.
Thank you, Diamond.
It's a camp for people who can't focus much. Kind of helps you concentrate.
Thank you, Diamond Hands Niner Socks, for the sub, gifting us up to Frosty Sloth, excuse me. And then thank you, Unquashable, for paying forward your gift subs you just got from Finger. Oh man, that's really kind. Finger, you're literally watching your money multiply. Thank you so much. And then Rabid Wombat with 100 bits. I'm saying more Zonia. Absolutely, more Zonia. I asked for more Zonia in my dreams, and I'm often denied. But let's see if we can get. Let's see if we get to. Zonia Dad, thank you for gifting us up to Nasus, who's been a really kind supporter of this channel, actually, as well. And 346 subs from Zonia. Thank you. We're at 90% of a level 2 hype train. Can we get to a level 3 hype train? 10% left. 3 minutes on the clock. Can we make that happen? Sub to the channel, give bits or give subs. If you have an Amazon Prime /Prime you can give one free sub per month to the channel. Help out this community. Make it a possibility. Oh boy, they're dissipating on me. Give your one free sub per month to this channel to make this a possibility. We're almost there to level 3. Sub to the channel, give bits or give subs. All right, let's give an outro while we're waiting for subs to come in to our kind individuals here, right? We will start with thanking Naya Socks. Naya Socks, thank you for getting another sub to Sam Law 27. Really kind of you. Pushing us over to level 3 hype train. Guys, can we get to level 4 hype train? Yeah, this is how I make this happen, and how I provide you for all this sweet content. Okay, all right. We're at level 2 hype train. Let's see if we get level 3 hype train. 2% done. 98% left. Can we make it to level 4 hype train? It allows me to do all this for you, right? Like I can't do it without kindness from people out there who are appreciating all this. So sub, give bits, or give subs, or resub. Resubbing also counts. All right. Back to this. Mad Latin, thank you for coming in and fighting valiantly. I didn't think it would be tilted like this, but like I knew I could just leave this in your hands. Not everyone can fight on their own. Not everyone can do that, right? Like Wick here has been alone fighting the entire payout for it, and he can handle it. But not everyone can do that. You can, and it's a skill. Seriously, not everyone.
It's my pleasure. I love fighting on my own for causes that I'm trying to figure out like what my like investment in this is. Like, if Elon Musk is like in charge of Twitter, like how much am I gonna care? Like, honestly, like, am I gonna lose sleep over it or not? But yeah, no, I don't mind being dogpiled on every once in a while, and this is like a kind of a low. Well, most of it was like kind of not dear to my heart. We're gonna have to talk about the January 6th stuff later, because we got some things to discuss. But yeah, no, I was happy to be here. Happy to hop on. I'm madlad_n. You can find me on Twitch. There's my thing. I moderate here sometimes, so I'm going to do shout outs for everyone too while we're at it. I also have a show on Mondays with Lilac Doll called You Might Like This, where we teach each other something interesting that we've learned. This Monday, it's Lilac's turn to teach me something. And tomorrow, also on the weekly stand-up, where we talk about workers' rights in game dev. So if you are interested in any of the things, feel free to find me at those locations. And yeah, thanks, Prime, for having me. It's been a pleasure as always.
Hey, thank you. Seriously, Matt Latin, you're great. And I always appreciate you, and I always I'm asking for you back, right? Like his DMs are full of requests from me.
It's actually true.
Yeah,
it's actually like legit true. I feel bad. I've been like so busy like the last few months. Like,
hey, you gotta take care of your family. That's number one. And you know, you have your personal life. But I'm glad that you were here. I'm like very thankful. So thanks so much. And I'm thankful to Finger for gifting another 10 hot tier and gifts us the channel. Thank you, Finger. 63 subs in total. Thank you. Because of him, we are at 96% of level 3 hype train. 4% left. Just under 2 minutes on the clock. Can we make it to level 4 hype train? It seems like we should be able to, right? I'm pretty sure. If you have a resub out there, that'll help us. That'll push us over the edge, right? A few bits in your pocket, or Zonia gifting 5 subs, that also will do it. Thank you, Zonia. Thank you, gifting 5 subs to the channel. Hey, really kind of you. 351 subs in total to this community. Thank you. You're one of our few big donors like that, and it means a lot. It's like seriously, shout out to you, Zonia. And I might as well give you your next the next outro. Zonia, again, like it really is a treat when Zonia comes through. Like, Zonia, do you realize like how much like my audience like loves you? Like, it's like a big thing.
It does seem to be a warm reception every time I'm on here.
Yeah.
Even though I don't come on that often, you know, but yeah, always a warm reception. Great audience, great viewer base.
That might be the secret. I mean, Wick is here all the time, and so
a little less warm reception in some circles.
Gotta kick him out.
Warwick says the more we hate him.
You gotta kick him out for a while, wait until people start getting thirsty for him, then bring him back. That's the way it works. Yeah. So thank you for having me back. And this is fun. I kind of needed this too. For those of you who don't know, recently my cat passed away, and that was on the 23rd. So it's been a bit of a rough week. And I'm kind of like, this gave me sort of the distraction that I needed, and I did this something similar yesterday as well. So I've been doing a little bit of panel activity and kind of picking up the pace again to kind of get my mind back onto other things instead of just crying all day. But this is great. Lactoid, my first time interacting with you. I guess you've walked away, but hopefully you can hear me. Really enjoyed engaging with you. I like where you're coming from. I definitely want to talk to you some more at some point, maybe be on another panel or do a discussion or something. Everybody else here I've been with before, all great people. Mad Laden, been a while, but great talking to you. Eucharist, also been a while, great talking to you. Wick, hasn't been quite as long because we were both on something recently. And I think H9, you and I haven't been on since like December or something.
Yeah,
So,
I come and go a lot.
Yeah, it's great working with you guys.
Yeah,
really
same.
fun. And I'm sorry I couldn't bring as much ML energy as I really wanted to, and really stand Stalin and prop him up, and fight for his amazing, undefeatable policies on this panel. But sometimes freedom of speech comes first. So thank you all again. Zonia Dead at Twitch. That's me. I'm gonna pick up and go on stream at some point pretty soon here, so I will be live pretty soon if anybody wants to check me out.
Absolutely. And Zoya, I'm sorry for your loss. Pets get close to you. Pets mean the world to people. And so it's like moving a member of your family. So sorry about that, friend.
Yeah, thank you. She very much was family, furry family members.
Okay, this is an awkward transition, but hey, we got a hype train, level 4 hype train. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I really am sorry. Oh, we have a level 4 hype train. 90 seconds on the clock. 34% done. 66% left. Can we get to a level 5 hype train? Guys, help out this community. 90 seconds left on the clock. Kamikaze, help me get to the level 5 hype train. Then I can stop this very awkward. Very awkward chill. But yeah, this is how we do this. So like, hop out this hype train. Let's get to a level. Problematic Pan, thank you for resubbing for 8 months. I'm sorry this outro is going so slowly for all of you guys. I promise to get it to you very soon. Thank you, Crystal Clear Art, for 300 bits. Thank you, Kamikaze, for 1,500 or 1,400 bits. That's not telling me right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 1,400 bits. Thank you. Pushing us ever so closer. We have less than a minute left. 66% done. We have a third left. Can we get to a level 5 hype train, guys? This is the time to make it happen. And also, I'm going to put myself on screen for this. So we're I'll try to celebrate this a bit more thoroughly on Tuesday. But it's now Monday here. On my oops, wrong button, god damn it. It's now it's now Monday here in my neck of the woods, and it's technically our 2-year anniversary. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Kamikaze, for the another 300 bits, and Small Forest for 100 bits. We have seconds on the clock. Will we make it? I guess not. But yeah, we
Is it Monday or Sunday?
It's May 1st, or Monday. Sorry, Monday is where we'll celebrate it. But yeah, on May 1st, 2 years on Twitch. Hooray! I mean, whatever. But yeah, on Monday we'll do it for the Reverie. We'll make a big thing about it. But thanks to those who happen to be here today. Yeah, so 2 years, it's a whole thing, whatever. But thank you all. And if you guys in or outside of a hype train, you can support the channel, sub to the channel, gifting bits or gifting subs, so we can do another year on the channel. So thank you all for that. Okay, let's continue our outros. Let's go to Lactoid. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Fine.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. Great people.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming through. Lactoid's a reliable guest. I'll tell you that, and a really good one. So thanks so much.
I'm used to deadlines. I do have a little bit of an outro if I could. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of give my closing thoughts on the whole discussion. I thought it was a super good discussion. I speak generally fast, so I'll try to get through it as quick as possible. So, I think the problem with censorship is that it drives us apart. I think it creates partisanship, as those that are rejected from the mainstream kind of go and start their own community where then they can speak and they can say the things that they want to say. Allowing people to discuss ideas freely is a way to keep us together and to prevent extremism. I think this partisanship comes up sometimes, right? Our friend Mad Lad said that the point of made the point that the primary group that would benefit from the whole discussion of freedom of speech would be the white supremacists. Well, I contend that the problem with the definition of white supremacy has expanded dramatically. And, I've been called a white supremacist just for disagreeing with affirmative action, which is the real systemic racism. And this is why I'm so skeptical about the progression of moderation. Elon Musk appears to oppose this and is in favor of less censorship. And so I support him, and I hope he does well. One of my favorite phrases is, when you limit speech, you do more than just tell somebody else that they're allowed to say something. You're telling me what I'm allowed to hear. And, I think that's just a great saying that I've heard. So those are just my final wrapping up thoughts. I want to thank all of you. And Mad Lad, you did good. You were kind of dogpiled, but
I'm going to offer my final statement, which is that political parties were not founded as a result of censorship. That's it. Strongly disagree, but thank you so much for your kind words. I'm sure we'll have a great time doing this.
Oh, we'll talk
again.
Soon. We'll talk
at a later time.
But and also huge thanks to Prime too for putting this whole thing on. I part of the reason I'm so reliable is because it's so much fun being on one of these. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Seriously, that means a lot. Thanks so much. Next, we'll go to Wick. Wick, just amazing guest, right? Like, I enjoy the man so much, and I reach out all the time, and he delivers all the time. Thank you, Wick. Big shout outs to Wick, for being such a great guy, reliable guest, and overall nice person to talk to.
Well, I try to be. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk about one of my favorite topics. Right, like it wasn't directly related to free speech, but it was pretty good, pretty damn close. To just give my closing thoughts on the issue, the freer society is to be able to speak out against that society, the more free that society is when it comes to dealing with societal issues of equity and justice. And when we seek to stifle free speech, we do so at the risk of stifling voices that can oppose authoritarian plots to infiltrate our government and things like that. If there is an actual fire that is going on, we not only shouldn't be punished for saying it, we have a moral obligation to point it out and not to be stifled from doing so. If you like my takes, you can often find me on PrimeCayes Show, but you can also find me at my own show, The Death of Certainty Show, which you can find at twitch.tv/Death of Certainty. I host a Mondays and Fridays, usually panel shows about various topics. This Monday, we're talking about student loan debt and debt forgiveness with a panel of very educated and interesting people. Tuesday, I have my open call-in show with my lovely co-host, Kaylee Marie. And we can't solve your problems, but we can sure listen to them. And that's a fun little segment. It's my favorite segment I do. You can tune in at 6 o'clock Eastern every Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Thursdays I do interviews usually and just more relaxing, talk about whatever. Sure. But yeah, that's me. Thanks for having me. Mad Lad, Eucharist, Samlaw, Zonia, and Lactoid, I love you all. Thank you.
H9H9. Thank you. Again, haven't had you for a while. I reached out and I just saw your names in my DMs and I was like, oh, let me hit them up. And I'm very glad that I did. Thanks for coming on. You have a different perspective than a lot of other people on these panels. So I appreciate it.
I thank you. I had a lot of fun, and just a 10-second closing out. Ads drive the reason people moderate, or these companies moderate, and it was a little scary seeing Mad Lab fear mongering about this stuff. It sounded like I was watching Fox News or CNN or something. He sounds like a pundit from one of those news networks. Truly.
It was terrifying.
Would you say that maybe we need to deplatform Mad Laden because of his fear-mongering?
I think we should get him a job at CNN or Fox News because he would be perfect. He would drive ratings.
I got an in at Fox if you want it.
Okay. I'll make it happen. All right. Thanks so much. And then last but not least, we have Eucharist. Eucharist is a rare treat, and I treasure it every single time. Eucharist, thanks for coming on and being a part of this. Spending a little time with us. I know you're a very busy guy, so thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here when I can. Prime asks me when he can, and I often say no because I'm busy and I hate it because usually the topics are so great and they're things that I want to yell at people about. And so tonight I finally got to yell at some people. I would be remiss in my own stereotypes of myself if I didn't recommend a book. So I'm gonna use my outro for that. So I am very tech pessimistic. I think the internet's ruining all of our lives, and I'm an unironic Luddite and smash the machines and all that. But there's a really good book. This is probably the only time I will ever recommend a book by somebody who's unironically a libertarian. But Robbie Soab from Reason Magazine has a really good book called Tech Panic: Why we shouldn't fear Facebook in the future. That has really good chapters on a lot of things that we touched on in brief in this conversation. Things like Section 230 reform, things like radicalization on social media, and kind of treats it, and it's a popular level book, but it's kind of collating a bunch of data, a bunch of more recent studies that have been done on the actual effects of these things and saying, hey, maybe things aren't as bad as we sometimes make them out to be. And so it's a really interesting book if you're somewhat pessimistic about the role that social media is playing in our society right now, or if you're one of these people who hilariously freak the fuck out because Elon Musk bought Twitter. Like, dude, it's like the memes never end. It's so funny. I can't love the guy, but I love the humor that comes from it. If you're one of those people, it's a great book to maybe help temper some of your pessimism, like it has tempered some of mine. So recommend Tech Panic by Robbie Soave, not because he's a libertarian. Libertarians are dumb. No offense, Lactoid, but it's good. It's a good book. Also, when we're talking about legal stuff in panels and there's an actual lawyer in the call, maybe you should ask him earlier what the actual thing is that's going on. We should do that sooner. Yeah.
Poor Lactoid getting shots from Zonia, getting shots from Eucharist, just all left and right here.
You just guys hate to slip. You just hate liberty.
It was a backhand and then a compliment, right? Because he's the lawyer. We should have been leaning on him more. We were talking about legal stuff half the time, and we kind of forgot he existed.
The libertarian lawyer. Okay, that's an important phrase.
Yeah, that kind of invalidates everything. All right, like, I mean, what's that law degree worth, really?
I feel like
a lot of money.
I feel like it's not uncommon that lawyers are libertarians.
It's uncommon. It is.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks you all again for being here. Much appreciated. We are going to go on to our open walk-on panel. Anyone here can join us, but if not, that's okay. Thanks for spending your time, your energy, your knowledge, and your passion. My community, I know they appreciate it just as much as I do. Have a good one. Bye.